Almost 7 years ago, my family cut me off completely and threw me out of the house. At the time, I was only 22, still working my first job, not financially stable enough to rent on my own. It all happened so suddenly that I had no time to prepare emotionally or financially. And the reason for all of it was my sister Hannah. Hannah and I were never especially close. She was quite a bit older than me. By the time she was 27, she married her boyfriend Pete. They stayed married for about 3 years before she filed for divorce, claiming Pete had been cheating on her with one of my friends. Back then, I was still living with my parents after college, saving money before moving out. Everything at home was fine until Hannah came back one night in tears, declaring she'd discovered Pete's betrayal. According to her, he had been having an affair for 6 months and somehow it was my fault. The reason? I had introduced Pete to my friend Emily. She had been struggling to gain weight, and since Pete was a certified nutritionist, he offered to help her out. That was it. Hannah twisted that into a story that Emily was the woman Pete cheated with. I was stunned. Emily and I weren't super close, but I knew her well enough to believe she would never get involved with a married man. And Pete, if anything, he always seemed hopelessly devoted to Hannah. He talked about her constantly, and not once in those 3 years did I see anything suspicious. But none of my doubts mattered. My parents instantly sided with Hannah. They didn't ask for evidence, didn't question anything, they just took her word for it. I can't blame them for choosing their daughter over their son-in-law, but what broke me was how quickly they turned on me. Hannah stormed into the house one day, hysterical, and convinced them that I was to blame for ruining her marriage simply because I had introduced Pete to Emily. Within minutes, they told me to pack my things and leave. When I begged them to listen, they said if I didn't go on my own, they'd throw me out, and just like that, I lost my home and my family in the same day. I still remember sitting on the curb outside with my bags, crying for an hour before finally calling a friend to let me crash at his place. I tried reaching out to my parents in the days that followed. Calls, texts, visits, nothing worked. They blocked my number. The one time I went to the house, my mum threatened to call the police if I didn't leave. That's when it hit me they truly believed I was responsible. Looking back, maybe. I shouldn't have been surprised. Hannah was always the favorite. I was the unexpected second child, the one who got leftovers while she got the spotlight. As kids, it didn't matter much to me, but I never thought that favoritism would destroy my place in the family entirely. Pete blocked me to no explanation, no chance to defend myself, and Hannah moved back in with my parents, making it impossible for me to even try talking things out. The only person left who might know the truth was Emily. We weren't close, but I reached out anyway. When I explained what Hannah had accused me of, she was horrified. She swore nothing ever happened between her and Pete, that their interactions had been strictly professional. To prove it, she even told me about her long-term boyfriend. They were already talking about marriage. She showed me photos of the two of them together. Her explanation made infinitely more sense than anything Hannah had said. Deep down, I already knew Hannah had lied, probably to cover the real reason for the divorce. But without any proof, I was powerless. My family had made up their minds, and I was left alone. Back then, all I wanted was to reconnect with my family. Despite everything they had done to me, I still missed them terribly. But as time passed, I had no choice but to adapt. I found an apartment, poured myself into work, and tried to build a life. Bills had to be paid, and keeping myself busy was the only way I knew how to cope. It wasn't easy. The pain was overwhelming, but slowly I taught myself to move forward with or without their support. Years went by and life began to change for the better. I moved out of that tiny apartment into something much nicer, built a stable career. And just last week I proposed to the woman I've been dating for 2 years. She said yes, but the real turning point came shortly after my engagement. A few days after my fiancée Lisa posted our engagement photos on Instagram and cross-shared them to Facebook, I got an email. Not just any email, but the email that finally explained everything that had happened years ago, complete with proof. It turned out that Lisa, who works as a doctor, had once met Pete, my former brother-in-law, at a medical seminar. They had stayed loosely connected on Facebook. That's how he stumbled across our engagement post. For the first time in years, I was glad the world was so small. Instead of messaging me directly, Pete chose to send an anonymous email. Later, He explained it was because he didn't want to seem awkward after all. Years had passed since the divorce, and he had no desire to look like someone still clinging to the past. He also admitted that since he'd blocked me back then, it felt strange to just pop back up in my life, but what mattered was the content. The email laid out the full truth behind the divorce, and it completely shattered the story Hannah had built. It was Hannah who had been unfaithful, not Pete. And worse, she had cheated with my friend Frank. At the time, Frank worked as a cashier at the local grocery store. Never in a million years would I have suspected anything between them. They'd been so careful to hide it. But Pete eventually found out. When confronted, Hannah tried to twist the situation, telling Pete that it was my fault. She claimed I had introduced her to Frank, even encouraging their connection by mentioning his interest in music since she was a decent singer herself. From there, she said, things just happened. To cover her tracks, she even insisted I had helped them hide the affair all along, which was, of course, a blatant lie. Pete admitted he was furious when he found out. Instead of thinking clearly, he blocked everyone in my family, me included. Looking back, he knows it was the wrong move, but at the time, anger clouded everything. The email itself included screenshots of conversations between Hannah and Frank, messages where they openly confessed their love, joked about how easy it was to fool Pete, and arranged secret meetups. Hannah had even signed off using her rarely mentioned middle name, something only a few people knew. There was no denying it. Reading those messages was surreal. For the first time in years, I had undeniable proof. Hannah had lied about everything. I eventually confronted Pete in person after realizing he was in Lisa's Facebook friends list. He admitted that Emily, my friend who'd originally been accused, had told him her side years ago. He just never told me because he didn't want to stir things up again. He regretted it now because if he had spoken up earlier, I could have cleared my name long ago. Still, he was willing to help me now. Pete and I agreed that Hannah's lies had destroyed enough lives, and neither of us wanted her manipulations to stand unchallenged any longer. The truth was clear. Hannah had weaponized her family's trust to protect herself, even if it meant sacrificing me. She dragged my name through the mud, convinced my parents to disown me, all to keep her own reputation intact while she pursued her affair, and for the first time in years, I had the evidence to finally set the record straight. I'm certain my sister never once tried to tell our parents the truth. Instead, she kept feeding them lies during the divorce, and they swallowed every word without hesitation. She knew that if our parents ever discovered she was the one who cheated, she'd be in serious trouble, and she just couldn't allow that. Well, now the truth is finally out, and I'm going to use it to destroy her life the same way she destroyed mine all those years ago. I wasn't sure if my parents were still living in the same house since I hadn't seen them in 7 years, but an old neighbor confirmed they never moved. Even better, Hannah still lived with them. That didn't surprise me at all. She was always lazy and hated responsibility. Living off aging parents while they did everything for her was exactly her style. 2 days ago, Pete and I showed up, unannounced. My mum opened the door and we pushed our way inside before she could react. My dad and Hannah were sitting in the living room, the happy family reunited, but only for a moment. Their faces twisted as soon as they saw us. My dad immediately started shouting, threatening to call the police if we didn't leave. I told him he could do whatever he wanted, but only after reading the documents we brought. My parents looked confused, while Hannah turned pale and bolted to her room. I figured she was trying to avoid the inevitable, but there was no escaping it. Pete pulled out the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah's messages with Frank while I explained the real story. Pete also revealed how Hannah had been forced to give up our grandmother's diamond heirloom ring to settle the divorce, since her teacher's salary couldn't cover the payout. My parents were stunned. We sat there watching as the drama unfolded. My dad demanded answers from Hannah, but when she tried lying yet again, even with the evidence right in front of her, he'd had enough. He packed her belongings, shoved them into a bag, and kicked her out of the house on the spot. I didn't need to be told twice. Pete and I walked out together, leaving Hannah begging our parents to let her back in exactly the way I had once begged them years ago. It was the sweetest revenge. I felt nothing but satisfaction. A couple days later, Hannah showed up at my place, demanding I fix things with our parents. I don't even know how she found my address, but I told her point blank that I owed her nothing. She ruined my life, and I simply returned the favor. We were even now. I Apparently, she has no pride left because the moment I said that, she broke down sobbing, calling me a monster. I honestly didn't care. I put on my headphones, turned up the music, and let Lisa keep working peacefully in her office. Eventually, Hannah left, but not before scrawling a message on my door with a marker, reminding me that I'm a vengeful monster. To be honest, I don't feel bad about what I did. I don't think I'm the villain here. I didn't lie or scheme like she did. I just exposed the truth.so. Am I really the bad guy for ruining my sister's life and getting her kicked out of our parents' home 7 years after she blamed me for her divorce? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Update 1: Hannah didn't stop bothering me. Even after a week, she kept calling non-stop 14 times in one day. I finally threatened to involve the police, and that made her back off at least for now. I have no idea how she keeps getting my number after I block her, but apparently she has her friends add me into group calls from different numbers. She's tried to guilt trip me, saying her teacher's salary isn't enough to live on. But no, that's not the real issue. What she really hates is finally having to pay rent, utilities, and groceries herself. And honestly, that's not my problem.as for my parents. They aren't much better. They found me on Facebook after seeing Lisa's engagement post. Now they're suddenly interested in being part of my life again. They even hinted that. They expect to be invited to my wedding. They still haven't apologized, but somehow think they deserve to show up on one of the most important days of my life. Lisa and I laughed reading their messages because they were so delusional it almost seemed like a bad joke, but in truth, the whole thing is more sad than funny. Update 2: Hannah showed up at my house again, even after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was getting ready to leave for work, but she stopped me by flopping onto the hood of my car, refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was incredibly annoying, and this time I actually called the police. They took her away while she screamed and cried, trying to paint me as the bad guy. Unfortunately for her, nobody bought it. It took some time to file the official report against her, but as soon as I did, I rushed to work so this incident wouldn't ruin my day. I figured my parents would bail her out since she's their favorite, and I was right. They sent her home and then followed up with a long message telling me I had been too harsh and unfair to them over a mistake they supposedly made almost 10 years ago. It was laughable. Nothing my sister and parents did to me back then could ever be called merciful or fair. No mercy stopped them from literally throwing me out of the house with nowhere to go. So now, I see no reason to offer forgiveness or kindness. I messaged my parents saying that after all these years, they had lost any right to tell me what I can or cannot do, and that they should stop deluding themselves. I haven't blocked them yet, had to check the message first, but I will. Soon, hopefully. Then I can finally cut that whole family out of my life for good. Update 3: I just got home from work, checked my socials, and saw that my parents sent me another long message. Lisa and I read it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I've ever seen. These poor people don't realize that nothing they say or do now can hurt me. I just laughed at how pathetic they are. They still think we're a family and announced they'd taken Hannah back, claiming both of their children deserve a second chance, as if I was ever in the wrong. They expected Lisa and me to visit them for dinner before my wedding to civilly resolve our differences. Too bold of them to assume I'd ever want them anywhere near my wedding. We laughed at their absurd message, and I responded that I had zero interest in any invitations from them. I'm perfectly happy living my life without them, just like I have for the last 7 years. They made it clear long ago that I'm better off without them. I'm grateful it took me so long to realize that. I no longer need them or their so-called forgiveness. They can continue playing happy family with Hannah all they want. I don't care. After sending that last message, I blocked them permanently. That's it. I'm done. I'm sure they'll try to contact me again somehow, but it doesn't matter. Lisa is the only family I need, and I'm happier than I've ever been with just her. My parents and sister never could see past their own noses, and I doubt they ever will. Next time they try to reach out, they'll be talking to my lawyer. My husband left the family to join a men-only crowd, then years later came crawling back hoping for a warm welcome in 29. I got married 6 years ago, but we've been divorced for 3 years now. I have 2 sons from my ex-husband. Adam, he's 30, ages 4 and 5. I have full custody because he didn't want the burden of a family. We were happy for the first 3 years of marriage, had 2 wonderful children, and were even planning to buy our own home to move out of our apartment. Then suddenly he says, I want to be free and explore the world. We'd been together since high school and were everything to each other. He was my first in everything and I was his. I always thought we'd be together forever. He seemed fine with not having much experience with other women besides me. But 3 years into the marriage, he told me he was unhappy and wanted us both to free ourselves from the burden, meaning our marriage and family, so we could live life to the fullest. It all sounded like nonsense. I couldn't understand it because I was sure he loved me. Adam insisted he still loved me, but you see, he also loved himself and wanted to give himself a chance to see the world. I even suggested temporarily opening our marriage, even though it would hurt me, just so he'd stay and not leave for good. But that idea didn't work for him. He wanted a divorce to keep things honest. I was crushed because it came out of nowhere. When I cried, he told me everything would be fine and that if we were meant to be, he'd come back. It was absurd and unfair, but that's how our marriage ended. One day he just packed his things and left to explore the world alone, leaving me with 2 kids without a second thought. When I asked what he thought would happen to the kids, he suggested leaving them with someone I trust so I could also travel and meet new people. That's when I fully realized he'd lost his mind. I stopped fighting the divorce. It went through easily. He didn't want anything and was willing to walk away from all responsibilities. His parents had money, so child support wasn't an issue. He had visitation rights but barely used them. When he did, he'd have me take the kids to his parents' house while he sat in another room, avoiding us. Even those visits stopped after the first couple of months. I later found out the real reason for his behavior from my friend Rachel, who had mutual acquaintances with Adam. Her cousin was part of the exact group of friends that influenced Adam. That cousin told her the whole story. About 2 months after our divorce, Rachel learned the truth. Her cousin lived a very indulgent lifestyle and was part of a men-only group, 6-7 guys who believed relationships were a burden. They had some kind of singleness pact. Adam was brought into the group by a colleague who thought he'd fit right in even though he had a wife and 2 kids. Rachel's cousin bragged to relatives that they had convinced a married man with kids to drop the dead weight and become successful, which is exactly what Adam did. He divorced me and gave up custody just to fully commit to their ideology. Rachel, curious, asked what the guy looked like. When her cousin pointed to Adam in a group photo, she instantly put 2 and 2 together and came to tell me. When I found out he had left us to join some ridiculous adventure-seeking club, I was furious. Honestly, it would have been easier for me if he'd just cheated. At least that would be a more understandable reason than this nonsense. I wanted to call and scream at him, but I didn't. Knowing the real reason only convinced me further that nothing I could say would change him. So I focused on raising my sons to be better men than their father. I hired a nanny, worked twice as hard so I could leave work at the office and devote my home time to my kids. My parents helped a lot. Even my ex-in-laws occasionally offered minimal help, probably out of shame for their son. They were the ones paying the child support, since Adam reportedly blew his own money on exotic trips and luxury hotels. Now my boys are sweet, well-behaved, and love each other dearly. We are our own family, and that's all we need. I barely think about Adam anymore. I worked my way into a great position and now earn double what I used to. For the last 2 years, everything was going great until last week. Out of nowhere, after 3 full years of no contact, Adam showed up. It was a Sunday and we were all at home. We even have enough saved now to buy our own house. But I stayed in this apartment because I love it so much and it's convenient for work. Obviously, I should have moved after all, because unfortunately, by staying in the same place, Adam knew where to find me. That day, he just showed up at our door without warning, and honestly, it felt like the air got knocked out of my lungs. It had been so many years. For the first few seconds, we were both silent, and I just looked at him, this awkward, huge bouquet of red roses, his teary smile. Call me heartless, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of tenderness or excitement, only pure, burning hatred, and before he could say anything, I slammed the door with all my strength so hard the floor shook. I told the kids to go to their rooms because I knew he'd try to convince me of something, and I definitely wouldn't be able to stay calm. Rage, resentment, and anger were boiling inside me, and I didn't want my kids to witness the chaos that was about to start. Sure enough, as soon as the kids left, Adam started whining that he didn't expect such a reception. I could hear him trying his hardest not to break into tears, which only pissed me off more. This was the guy who had dumped all this bitch on me for years ahead, and now he dared to cry and act like he was the victim. Then he started saying he had come back to apologize, that he regretted everything he'd done in the past, and now he just wanted his old life back. I was shocked, but I let him finish, because some part of me wanted to hear that apology, whatever that word even meant to him. I had completely erased him from my mind, but his sudden appearance stirred everything up again, and maybe, in some twisted way, I enjoyed the chance to put him in his place. I wanted him to know that without him, our lives had only gotten better, and nobody missed him. He went on for a couple of minutes about how much fun he'd had all these years, but in the end, he felt empty because there was no one to come back to accept another lonely hotel room. He admitted that in recent months, he felt like something was missing and finally made the very difficult decision to come back and apologize so he could fix everything. Turns out the thrill of traveling and exploring life with his new group of friends had burned out within a few months, but he clung to that lifestyle because he was afraid to return. He thought that since he'd sacrificed so much for it, he had to stick with it until the end. But now, he just wanted to get it all back. The more he talked, the more I wanted to open the door and punch him in his stupid face with all my strength. I couldn't listen to this nonsense anymore, so I told him to leave us alone, that I didn't want to see or hear him again. But Adam being Adam, he was sure that if he kept rambling and begging at my door, he'd convince me eventually at some point. It got extremely annoying, and the kids needed to be called for dinner, so I just banged on the door and yelled that we were no longer a family and that he should get the hell out. I think that actually stunned him, because after that, I didn't hear him anymore. When the kids were having dinner, I immediately called my lawyer and told him everything that had happened just in case. Then I called my parents, told them about Adam's visit, what he said, and how I responded. They assured me I'd done the right thing and had nothing to worry about. I didn't call my ex-in-laws, I didn't even know what to say to them, and I'm sure their son will tell them himself anyway. But as soon as I finished those calls, Rachel rang. Since she was the one who once told me the truth about why Adam left, I answered, already guessing she had something important to say, and I was right. The first thing she asked was if Adam had come by. I said yes, and then she told me her cousin had just called her to explain exactly why he had come back. Rachel and I are very close friends, and ever since she passed me that information from her cousin, she's told him to inform her immediately about anything related to Adam because I was the one he dumped back then. When her cousin found out about me, I think he suddenly stopped feeling proud about recruiting Adam. I don't blame them, it's Adam's fault alone for being such a spineless coward. Her cousin promised to keep us updated about Adam and even contacted me once himself to apologize. I forgave him, I had no grudges, but of course, we didn't become friends. He had been telling Rachel what Adam was up to, so I'd always known what was going on with him. By the way, after the divorce, Adam had blocked me everywhere, and now her cousin reached out to Rachel again to tell her the truth about why Adam had returned, and she passed it on to me. Apparently, their group had a shared chat since they first met. Just a couple of hours before Adam showed up at my door, he wrote in there about his plan. The guys seemed to support him at first, but Adam suddenly exploded, accusing them of fake support. He yelled that they had betrayed him because he'd sacrificed his whole life, left his wife and kids to live like them, but it turned out that over the years, they'd all gotten into relationships, and now he was the only one left, like the last idiot who actually ditched his family just to party with the boys. And meanwhile, those guys, most of them are now dating someone. They told him it wasn't fair to expect them to stick to the same ideology forever, especially since their whole no women philosophy was something they came up with when they were young and stupid. Now most of them are in their 30s and don't need that lifestyle anymore. In fact, a couple of them have been in serious relationships for over a year, and one of them is even engaged. So all their macho bragging from back then could just be tossed in the trash, and the only person who truly got screwed over was Adam, but he turned out to be the only idiot who believed all that nonsense they were spouting. As a result, a serious argument broke out between Adam and those guys, the very same people who once congratulated him for leaving me, but now they themselves want the life he gave up for them. And even though they were still trying to support him when he said he wanted everything back, it wasn't enough for him. He wanted them to apologize for making him leave his wife and kids. That's what the whole fight was about. The guys refused to apologize, and rightly so. They were just sharing their views, but none of them ever told Adam he had to leave us. to be part of their circle. Of course, he would have had to give up the idea of traveling the world and living like them, since he had obligations at home, me and the kids, but he still could have stayed friends with them. No ultimatums were ever given. He left us of his own free will for the life he thought he wanted, just so he could fit into the group. And now he's doing the same thing again now that most of those guys are in relationships. He once again felt the pressure, once again wanted to be like everyone else. And that's the real reason he came back, not out of a sense of duty or emptiness like he tried to tell me. When I heard all this from Rachel, I started shaking because I had actually felt guilty for kicking him out. That's why I called. My parents, wanting to hear that I'd done the right thing. If I had known all this beforehand, he really would have gotten it from me. But Rachel's cousin had been swamped at work, and while all this was being discussed in the group chat, he wasn't checking his phone, so he didn't know anything. Later, when he had time and saw the messages, he told Rachel right away, and she called me. So I only learned all this after Adam's visit, but now that I knew the real reason he came back, I decided once and for all that I would never let him back in, and I wasn't going to feel guilty anymore. He never once felt guilty about what he put me and the kids through, so why should I feel anything? He's just a terrible person, curve period. I mentally prepared myself for him to try crawling back again, but it never happened. For the next couple of days, I heard nothing. I even asked Rachel to check with her cousin if he knew anything, but he said he had no idea because after that fight, Adam had blocked everyone from the group, even Rachel's cousin, though he hadn't even been part of the argument and only learned about it afterward. That was a problem for me because if even the cousin was blocked, I completely lost my source of information about what Adam might do next. Adam is the kind of person who, before buying a damn pair of shoes, will talk it over with 5 people. He never does anything without consulting someone. And now that he'd blocked everyone, I was in total uncertainty. So naturally, when my former in-laws called me 3 days ago, I was caught off guard and didn't know what to expect. They said they were calling to discuss what I told Adam when he came to make things right. I told them I didn't want him back, and that was that. But they started saying that all this time they'd continued to pay child support and made sure their grandkids never went without anything, so I had no right to claim that we were no longer his family. We argued over the phone because they started defending him, and in the end, I just hung up. I keep replaying it in my head, but I still don't understand exactly what I did wrong. I honestly don't think I did anything bad. But in one thing, my in-laws were right. They have been fulfilling their part of the agreement. And technically, Adam still has the right to see the kids. He just hasn't exercised it in a long time. I don't know what to do now. On the one hand, I do want my kids to have a father, even though I'm managing fine on my own, so I don't want to take that away from him, not even sure I have the legal right to. I just can't make sense of anything right now. The only thing on my mind is my children. Am I wrong for telling my ex-husband that me and the kids are no longer his family after he abandoned us for 3 years? First update. Hi everyone. Thank you for your comments and support. I've decided to file an appeal and try to change the custody arrangements so that Adam will no longer even have the right to see the children. I don't know if I'll succeed or not, but it's worth a try. It's been 2 days since I posted my story here, and that's exactly the advice I received from most of you, so that's what I'm going to do. My parents support me too. The fact that Adam and his parents pay child support just means they were fulfilling the legal part of the agreement, but everything else fell entirely on me. I raised our children while he was out having fun with his buddies. He can't just decide when it's convenient for him to be part of our lives and show up on his own terms. Second update today, I filed the paperwork to terminate Adam's parental rights, and honestly, I really regret not doing it sooner. I should have filed as soon as he stopped visiting the kids a couple of months after he left us, but oh well, better late than never. Many people here commented on my decision, but I take back my earlier words about not wanting to deprive the kids of a father. They never had a father around, and who knows, Adam might one day walk out again. He was gone for 3 years, and now he can leave for good if he wants to live for himself, but not at the expense of my nerves and my children's mental health. I won't allow it, and I truly don't think I'm taking anything away from my kids because they never had a father to begin with, so they won't be missing anyone. Third update, so I didn't manage to fully terminate his parental rights, but now he can only see the kids if I'm personally present. That's something at least now he can't just push us around. If he can prove to the court that he's capable of being a stable and reliable father, then maybe we'll reconsider this arrangement. But for now, this is the maximum he gets. As for me, he is never coming back to me. That's not even up for discussion. After the court hearing, when he tried to talk to me again, I snapped and told him straight out that I knew about his pathetic need to fit into the cool crowd and that he should just marry his buddies because he's never getting anything from me. And if he weren't the father of my children, I wouldn't even give him a second glance. Then I just left with the kids, leaving him and his parents standing there with their jaws dropped. Damn, that felt good. So that's where things stand now. I don't know what will happen next, but I'm glad this at least turned out in the children's favor. They are the only ones who matter to me. Now, if Adam somehow manages to become a normal, responsible father and take on his parental duties, maybe my kids won't have to grow up without a dad, and maybe they won't have to learn how to shave from YouTube tutorials. But if he even once tries to pull any crap again, he will deeply regret it. He's already messed with my head enough, but I will never let my children go through that, no matter what. Son chose his stepfather over me and asked me to give up my parental rights. Everyone, I'm in a really tough spot with my son right now, and I deeply appreciate if you read this with care before commenting. My son just turned 17 a week ago, and this fall, he's supposed to start college. Our relationship has been strained ever since I decided to divorce his mother 2 years ago. No matter how hard I tried to repair things, nothing worked. He keeps pushing me away, and it's painfully heartbreaking. I've tried to stay close. While I had the strength, he doesn't respond to my messages or calls. And when he does come over, he spends all his time in his room, refusing to talk. The only time we communicate is at the dinner table, and even then, he keeps conversations to a minimum. Things with my ex-wife aren't great either, which I think is part of why my son seems to hate me so much now. I'm 44, my ex is 42. We were married almost 20 years. Everything started falling apart after I lost my job a few years ago. I was suddenly fired and it shook our family. She's a teacher and always managed with her salary, which I admire, but she began resenting me. Even though I was doing everything I could to find a new job, the pressure mounted. Arguments became daily, then we barely spoke unless absolutely necessary. Bitterness built and she filed for divorce. I didn't fight it. We were both exhausted, but she probably expected me to fight at least a little for our marriage. When I didn't, her hatred only deepened. During the divorce, she called me once, asking if I really planned to end it all. I told her, yes, everything we owned was divided evenly, no disputes, but our relationship was shattered. We had to work together for our son's sake, who struggled with our split. He didn't want us to divorce, and when it happened, he sided with his mother. It hurt deeply. After the divorce, we lived separately. My son naturally stayed with his mother, and I stayed with a friend. I think this is when she convinced him it was all my fault. She pulled him into our battles. It was cruel, but she wanted revenge, and she got it. 3 months ago, she married her colleague. I know him. He'd even visited our house a few times during her work gatherings. Everyone was shocked by their wedding, myself included. I don't know how long they'd been together or if she cheated, but at this point, it doesn't matter. What really hurt was seeing my son's posts about his new stepdad. They attended football games together, spent time together. Even on his birthday, which I wasn't invited to, he posted a picture with his mum and stepdad captioned, "Mum and Dad, it crushed me." I later organized a birthday for him, but he showed zero enthusiasm. He and his friends were in his room with the cake while I sat in the living room, wondering what went wrong. That evening, after his friends left, my son said he wanted to discuss something serious. He told me he had thought a lot and decided he wants me to give up my parental rights so his stepdad can legally adopt him. He said he no longer feels any connection with me and prefers his new family, and he doesn't want me in his life anymore. I was stunned. At first, I wanted to argue, but quickly realized it wouldn't help. If he wants this new life, I can't force him otherwise. Heartbroken, I told him I would do whatever makes him happy. He thanked me and left the next day. The following days were the hardest. I couldn't make myself do anything, even skipped work for a few days. Everything felt meaningless. I had tried so hard to give him a good life, but he doesn't want that life from me at least. I spent days lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying not to break down. I had no idea how to fix things, or if they could even be fixed at all. I knew my ex-wife played a role in this, and I suspect she's happy that she completely severed my bond with my son. I also despised her new husband, not because he married the woman I once loved, but because he was taking my son away from me, but there was nothing I could do. Arguing with my son would only make things worse. All I could do was accept it and hope he might change his mind someday, and then a miracle happened. My son came back yesterday, but not for the reasons I had hoped. I thought maybe he finally realized that I'm his father. Perhaps his mother had brainwashed him, making him believe his stepdad would be a better father. But that wasn't the case. I hoped he'd understand how deeply I love him, and that love would make him reconsider. When he arrived, I was overjoyed, thinking he had changed his mind. But he looked extremely upset. When I asked what was wrong, he told me he didn't want me to give up my parental rights anymore because his stepdad said he couldn't afford his college tuition, so he had to come to me. There were no other options. His mother alone couldn't cover it all, so if he wanted to attend the college of his choice, he'd have to follow the custody agreement. He was heartbroken, and it cut me deeply. I never treated him badly, in fact, quite the opposite. I couldn't understand why he hated me so much. I hadn't done anything to deserve this hatred from my own son. It infuriated me that he despised me for no reason, except maybe because his mother had filled his head with lies. I have to admit she did a good job. I told him he didn't have to engage with me if he didn't want to, and that there are other ways to pay for college, get a job, apply for student loans. If he thinks I'm the worst father, then let him do what he needs to ensure his stepdad adopts him, because I don't want him to suffer any longer. Of course, I said it with heavy sarcasm and he understood. He looked embarrassed, said nothing, and I just kept talking. It felt like years of bottled up frustration and hurt, caused by my own son's hatred, finally erupted. I told him I didn't divorce by choice, his mother wanted it. And the only reason she hates me so much is because I didn't fight for our marriage. I don't know what stories she fed him while he lived with her, but I can assure him that the divorce wasn't just my fault. He's only 17 and knows almost nothing about me or my life. If he believes everything his mother told him, he's in for an unpleasant surprise. I'm not his enemy and never wanted the divorce, but if she did, I wasn't going to cling to that relationship. I knew he was upset about the divorce, but I tried to make things as good as possible for him. Even when I lived separately, I came over for dinners, but he ignored me because his mother convinced him it was all my fault. Eventually, I ran out of patience, and my son was just stunned. He had nothing to say. I could see my words had touched him. He looked both shocked and guilty. He barely muttered sorry and returned to his mother. The next day, we didn't speak, and I felt terrible about what happened. I should have controlled my emotions, and I'm ashamed for raising my voice, even though he's only 17 and his mother manipulated him for 2 years. But I also feel it was cruel of him to say the only reason he came back was so I would pay for his education. That felt completely wrong, so maybe yelling was my fault, but I couldn't hold back. Before we go on, I invite you to drop your thoughts in the comments. Personally, I think he did the right thing. I've spent my life holding back emotions, never speaking up when hurt, and it backfired. People, unfortunately, don't see silence as virtue, they see it as weakness to exploit. Meanwhile, his mother sits comfortably and continues to manipulate him, telling him I'm to blame for everything that I left him, that I divorced her, and so on. It's cruel, but sometimes you have to stand up for yourself and speak your mind, even if it's uncomfortable. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments before we continue. Update 1. Hi everyone. I just want to say thank you for all the support and kind messages. It warms my heart to see so many single dads connecting with my story. Stay strong, guys. I also noticed many of you asked whether I ever suspected my ex-wife of cheating. Honestly, no. Even during the divorce, there was nothing that made me think she was unfaithful. Maybe there were signs, but I simply didn't notice them. And honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. Whether she cheated or not isn't important. I have all the proof I need that she's a terrible person, using our son just to hurt me. Regarding why I didn't try to have my son live with me during the first months after the divorce, I tried. I really did. But my son insisted he was more comfortable staying with his mother, and since he was still in school, I didn't want to create more problems for him or my friend who was hosting me at the time. I visited occasionally, but the environment was so hostile, thanks to my ex, that I couldn't stay long. Eventually, he began to resent me. I don't know what more I could have done to prevent it. I really tried to shield him from the divorce drama, but my wife made sure to pull him into it and make him hate me. By the time I realized her plan, it was too late. My son had already drifted too far from me. It's been a few days since I last spoke with him. We've been texting but haven't called or met. I haven't heard from my ex either, so I assume he didn't tell her I yelled at him. Usually, he would have complained immediately, causing a huge scene, but since he hasn't, maybe it means he's finally starting to change. I'm cautiously hopeful, just hoping he calls or comes over so we can have a proper conversation and start mending our relationship. Update 2. Today, my son finally visited me, and the meeting, let's just say, was intense. I won't pretend our relationship magically healed. That's not how it works. Fixing years of damage takes time and effort. But today was at least a first step, and I'm grateful for that. At first, he was awkward and uncomfortable, but he apologized for his behavior. He admitted that during our divorce, his mother told him I destroyed our family and didn't fight for it, and he believed her. He hadn't heard my side, and at 15, he just needed someone to blame. I was the easiest target. The situation worsened when his mother remarried. My son said it was entirely her idea to post pictures with his stepdad, pretending they were a happy family even though they weren't that close. She did it just to punish me for the divorce, hiding the fact that she filed for it. She even tried to make him believe he needed me to relinquish parental rights so his stepdad could officially adopt him, but she didn't discuss it with him. She just presented it as a fact. His stepdad was shocked and explained that while he enjoys spending time with him, he isn't ready to adopt because the bond isn't there yet, and he didn't want to pay for college if adoption happened. This upset my son deeply, leaving him frustrated and conflicted. It was a relief to finally talk and for him to start seeing the manipulation from his mother. It was an incredible day, and we managed to begin restoring our connection. I know rebuilding will take time, but this was a strong start. I told him I'm ready to forgive and start fresh, no matter what happened in the past. He promised to talk to his mother about the lies she's been telling him, and even suggested family therapy so we can rebuild in a healthy way. I'm glad this is finally happening, and even more satisfied knowing my ex will get what she deserves. She's a terrible person who doesn't deserve to be a mother. Harsh, maybe, but true. Using her son solely to hurt me proves it. I'm even considering seeking full custody, though of course I'll discuss it with him first. If he truly wants to stay with her, I won't force him, but I hope he sees her for who she really is and decides to stay with me. Author's note: she spent years manipulating and gaslighting our son just to make my life miserable. I can't even imagine being that heartless. Update 3. My son just texted me. He wants to come over, and he asked me to pick him up from his mother's house. He said he has too many things to take the bus like usual. I'm in shock. I'm almost certain he's decided to move in with me. Everything happened so suddenly. I'm standing outside my ex's house waiting. He asked me to wait a few minutes. I can hear arguing inside, but I can't tell who's shouting at whom. I want to go in and bring him home immediately, but I can't without permission. I know she'll do everything possible to cause trouble, so I'm just waiting outside, hoping he comes out soon. Update 4. The shocking confrontation. He finally got home after an extremely long evening. I'm exhausted, but I feel I need to share what happened so I can process everything that went down today. As I mentioned earlier, I was waiting outside my ex's house because my son asked me to pick him up. A few minutes after posting my last update, he finally came out. Even then, I could hear yelling from inside the house. My son looked furious as he walked to the car with his bags. Soon, I noticed my ex-wife storming out behind him. She was absolutely enraged, and the moment she saw me in the car, she came right up to the window and started screaming. It was terrifying, but I told her that if she didn't step back, I'd call the police. She did back off a little but didn't leave. As I helped my son load his things into the car, she continued shouting at me, claiming I had turned our son against her and calling me every name imaginable. I didn't care. I knew the truth, my son knew the truth, and that was all that mattered. She kept yelling even as we drove away, and suddenly, when we were just a few meters from her house, she threw a rock at the car, smashing my rear light. I pulled over a bit further and immediately called the police to report the incident. My son and I were in shock at her actions. I couldn't believe she would behave like this just because she'd been exposed. I filed a police report against her and returned home a few hours ago. My son had a complete nervous breakdown, and I could see how badly he was affected. Tomorrow, the first thing I'll do is take him to a therapist. I've also decided to file for full custody and a restraining order tomorrow because what happened today is completely unacceptable. I still hope her current husband realizes just how crazy the woman he's living with is and leaves while he still can. I also hope to secure full custody of my son and a restraining order against my ex as soon as possible. That's it for now. As you can see, things turned out to be even more complicated and intense than we imagined. Yet, the ending feels amazing. For me, because I finally got the chance to rebuild my relationship with my son, though gaining full custody was never something I expected this soon. We don't yet know if the court will grant full custody, but I believe there's a very good chance. In the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, beauty was a daily devotion. Ancient Mesopotamians didn't just groom themselves, they ritualized it. For them, cleanliness and adornment were signs of civility, favor with the gods, and even political status. You weren't just putting on a face for the world. You were preparing yourself for divine observation. Let's start with the eyes. Thick black eyeliner wasn't born in Cleopatra's boudoir. It was thriving centuries earlier in Sumer. Both men and women painted dramatic lines using kohl, a powdered concoction of lead, copper, and antimony. While this might horrify modern dermatologists, they believed it protected them from evil spirits and more practically from the desert sun's glare. Their skincare routine would make modern influencers pause. Crushed semi-precious stones were mixed. Intels to exfoliate and brighten the skin. Mud from the riverbanks full of minerals was smeared onto the body in thick cooling layers. After it dried, it wasently scraped off, leaving the skin smooth and luminous. Yes, the first clay masks were less spa-day and more ancient science. Hair removal was another ordeal. Using sharpened seashells or early tweezers, they plucked, scraped, or burned off body hair. Smoothness waist-weighted with refinement and with godliness. The more polished your appearance, the closer you were to resembling divine perfection. Even their statues of gods and priestesses are hairless and immaculately styled with symmetrical features and wide painted eyes. And let's not forget the scent. Fragrant oils weren't just pleasant, they were powerful. Myrrh, frankincense, and cedar were infused into animal fats and applied to the skin like perfumes. People believed these scents purified the body and pleased the gods. In royal courts, perfumed oils were so valuable that they were offered as tribute. Eyebrows tattooed. Permanent cosmetics weren't invented in the 20th century. They were already practiced in ancient temples. Women inked their brows using soot or natural dyes, creating bold arches that framed their faces dramatically. It was beauty with commitment. If you think today's beauty trends are extreme, let's talk about Cleopatra. Yes, the Queen of Eyeliner was more than just a seductress. She was the poster girl for Greco-Roman beauty obsession. While her face graced coins, her influence reached into every apothecary and boudoir from Alexandria to Rome. And she wasn't alone. Roman women inherited Egypt's taste for luxury and then dialed it up to 11. Let's begin with the iconic milk bath. Cleopatra was rumored to bathe in donkey milk daily. Whether it was 500 donkeys or just a strong rumor, the truth is this: lactic acid found in sour milk is a natural exfoliant. Romans copied this enthusiastically. Elite women bathed in milk, honey, and rose petals, believing it would smooth wrinkles and lighten the skin. And yes, it worked, just not for your wallet. Now to the face. Roman women desired pale, almost ghostly skin, a sign you were wealthy enough to avoid sunlight. Enter ceruza, a face powder made off white lead, highly toxic, but hey, it gave that flawless matte finish. Women applied this daily, layering it on thick over the cheeks and forehead. Over time, it caused sores, hair loss, and in some cases, death, but looking like a goddess. Worth it, rouge and lip stain were made from red ochre, crusher beetles, or mulberry juice. The more vivid your lips and cheeks, the more youthful and seductive you appeared. For eyeliner and eyebrows, soot mixed with animal fat did the trick. And if your eyebrows weren't naturally bold, no problem. Just draw them on, or better yet tattoo them just like in Mesopotamia. Hair was another battlefield. Roman women curled their hair into intricate styles using heated metal rods long before your grandmother's curling iron. They dyed it using herbs, ash, or event-fermented leeches. Yes, seriously, for that fashionable blonde look, wigs made from German slave hair were common among elite Roman women trying to show off their wealth and style. And perfume, an empire in itself. Romans were addicted to scent. Oils infused with saffron, cinnamon, and roses were rubbed into every crease of the body. Baths smelled like botanical gardens dipped in musk. In ancient China, beauty wasn't flashy. It was philosophical. Where Rome chased glamour, the Chinese aesthetic prized balance, harmony, and an key. But don't mistake subtlety for simplicity. The beauty rituals of dynastic China were just as rigorous, deeply spiritual, and sometimes shockingly intense. Start with the skin. Chinese beauty standards revered a pale porcelainic complexion, not because they feared the sun, but because fair skin symbolized nobility and leisure. Peasant women worked the fields under harsh sunlight. Aristocratic women feasted indoors and preserved their complexions like priceless scrolls. White lead powder, ground pearl, and even powdered rice were common ingredients. It wasn't just makeup, it was medicinetto. Many formulas were designed by court physicians and believed to boost ki or prolong life. But the real star of ancient Chinese skynair was jade. Jade rollers, which TikTok made trendy again, were used centuries ago by Han Dynasty women. Cool. To the touch and symbolically connected to immortality, jade tools were rolled across the face to promote circulation, reduce epiphanis, and maintain youth. Even emperors were known to keep jade pillows, believing the stone would draw toxins from the skin while they slept. Eyebrows were serious business. Women shaped and painted their brows to reflect fashion and politics. In some dynasties, long swooping brows were in vogue. In others, short and upward tilted lines dominated. Ink made from burnt willow or charcoal was applied with brushes made from rabbit fur. Some trends even encouraged removing natural brows altogether and drawing them higher on the forehead, achieving a more heavenly appearance. Lips were tinted with a blend of cinnabar and animal fat, sometimes mixed with beeswax. Rouge made from safflower petals was dabbed on cheeks in small circles. And bawdy marks, they weren't accidental. Some women painted tiny black dots near hair, lips, or eyes, considered flirtatious symbols of charm and mystique. Hair care was a daily ritual. Women used fermented rice water and camellia oil to wash and nourish their hair, which they often grew down to their knees. Elaborate updo held in place with jade pins and golden combs weren't just about style. They were a declaration of status, elegance, and cultural refinement. To the ancient Chinese, beauty wasn't loud or lethal. It was meditative, disciplined, and symbolic. It was artful restraint paired with quiet power, written not in words, but in the soft glow of powdered faces, and a curve of a perfect brow. If ever there was a time when beauty killed, literally, it was the Renaissance. In the courts of Italy, England, and France, women weren't just enhancing their appearance. They were slowly poisoning themselves in pursuit of affection. The goal? A glowing alabaster white face with blood-red lips and high, delicate brows. The method, a chemical cocktail that would terrify a modern dermatologist. Let's start with the most infamous Venetian ceruse. This was a luxurious face paste made from white lead and vinegar. It gave a smooth bone-white finish, hiding blemishes and wrinkles. Queen Elizabeth. I wore it religiously. Under candlelight, it gave a luminous glow that made skin look porcelain. But the downside, skin corrosion, paralysis, tooth decay, and eventually death.it was the Renaissance equivalent of a slow drip time bomb. But wait, there's arsenic too. For women who wanted to brighten their complexion or lighten freckles, arsenic wafers were sold as miracle pills. Swallowing small doses supposedly gave the skin a translucent look. It also caused vomiting, kidney damage, and internal bleeding. But body waits for no one, not even your liver. Eyebrows were plucked into thin arches or removed entirely. A high, rounded forehead was fashionable, so women shaved their hairlines an inch or two to create the illusion of a larger brain and therefore higher virtue. Balding was rebranded as high status. Cheek color came from crushed berries, cochial, bugs, or vermilion. Lips were painted with similar mixes. Some women used mercury-based red dyes, which added a seductive pop of color and irreversible nerve damage. Flushed cheeks were not just pretty, they indicated youth and vitality, something aristocrats cherished in an era of short lifespans. And the smell-cloying fragrances made from ambergris, musk, and civet were worn not just for allure, but to mask the unwashed reality beneath layers of toxic cosmetics. After all, bathing was still viewed with suspicion in many parts of Europe. Hair. Golden locks were ideal, especially in Italy. Women bleached their hair using mixtures of sulfur, soda, and lemon juice. then sat in the sun wearing wide-brimmed hats with the tops cut out to expose only their hair. It worked, but also fried their scalps. Long before modern skincare touted natural as a buzzword, ancient India had already written the manual. And it wasn't just Skynair. It was Ayurveda, the science of life. Indian beauty rituals weren't isolate routines. They were extensions of spiritual wellness, diet, and inner balance. Beauty was the outer mirror of your doshas, your elemental energies. Let's start with the bath. The ritual of cleansing was sacred. Women of the Vedic period bathed in turmeric-infused water or milk, followed by exfoliation with upin, a paste of chickpea flour, sandalwood, turmeric, milk, and rosewater. It brightened the skin, slowed aging, and purified energy. No parabens, no microplastics, just ingredients from the kitchen that doubled as sacred medicine. Hair was a crowning glory. Coconut oil, amla, Indian gooseberry, and hibiscus were infused into warm oils, massaged into the scalp to stimulate growth, calm the mind, and ward off premature graying. Thick, waistline hair wasn't just an aesthetic, it was a marker of vitality and femininity. Hair oiling sessions were communal, intimate, and meditative. Kajal, the black eyeliner still used across India today, had spiritual roots. Made from soot and ghee, it was believed to protect from the evil eye. Mothers would apply it not just to themselves, but to their babies as a shield against negative forces, but it also framed the eyes beautifully, giving them the depth of ancient potra fragrance. Entire cities like Kanaui became famous for distilling adhesars, perfumes made from flowers like jasmine, rose, and vetiver. These oils were rubbed onto the skin, used in hair, and even mixed into bath water. Their purpose wasn't just seduction, but spiritual clarity. Scents helped align the senses with thetavan. Lip and cheek tints came from beetroot, saffron, and crushed rose sepals. And teeth cleaned with neem sticks and charcoal long before plastic toothbrush arrived. Even dental hygiene was a ritual timed with moon cycles and linked to doshic balance. Perhaps most unique was meandi henna, used to decorate hands and feet, especially during weddings. Henna wasn't just cosmetic. It cooled the body, lowered stress, and signified joy, fertility, and transformation. Every swirl in the design told a story. The ancient Greeks adored beauty, but not in the flashy, gilded sense of later empires. For them, beauty was moral. Physical perfection reflected a virtuous soul. A sculpted body or symmetrical face wasn't just attractive, it was a sign of inner harmony, intelligence, and divine favor. So, it's no surprise that grooming in classical Greece was practically a civic duty. Let's begin with the skin. Like the Romans, Greeks idolized pale complexions. A white face meant leisure and nobility. A tanned face meant you worked outside, which was for slaves and peasants. To achieve this ghostly ideal, Greek women used powders made from white lead, again, chalk, or crushed seashells. These powders weren't subtle. In fact, some women layered them so thickly that they cracked when they smiled. But hey, beauty is sacrifice. Red lips and cheeks came from mulberries, red iron oxide, Orevan wine dregs. The richer the red, the more desirable the look. However, application had to be light. Heavy makeup was frowned upon. A modest flush meant good health and chastity. 2. Much that was associated with prostitutesco as Achetia, who famously used richer rouge and elaborate cosmetics to entertain philosophers and statesmen alike. Hair care was no afterthought. Greek women prized long wavy hair, often styled in braids, buns, or knots, and held together with ivory or bronze pins. To lighten their hair, they rubbed in vinegar, lemon juice, and sometimes used ashes. Blonde hair especially was idealized as divine and foreign. Think Helen of Troy. Wigs and hairpieces matter from enslaved northern women weren't uncommon among the elite. Eyebrows were key. A single continuous brow, yes, oni brow, was a sign of purity and intelligence. Women who weren't naturally blessed would fake it using powdered antimony or soot. Some even glued goat hair between their brows, all for that soft, scholarly look. Perfumes were blended with care using olive oil as a base mixed with herbs like margam, thyme, and iris root. They were applied after bathing, which the Greeks did obsessively, often in public baths. Cleanliness was next to godliness, literally. In the jungles and highlands of Mesoamerica, beauty wasn't soft and aesthetically wasn't subtle. For the Aztec and Mayan civilizations, beauty was bold, a physical badge of identity, power, and sacred duty. The ideal body was carved, and sometimes painfully altered, all in service of the gods and societal status. Let's start with the most intense cranial modification. Among both the Mayans and Aztecs, shaping a baby's skull was seen as an enhancement. From infancy, wooden boards were gently but firmly bound to a child's head to elongate the skull into a sloped, almost cone-like shape. It was a sign of nobility, intelligence, and beauty. The longer and smoother the forehead, the higher your social standing. Next up, dental decoration. Forget whitening strips. Mayan elites embedded jade, turquoise, and even hematite into teeth. Tiny holes were drilled with obsidian tools, and precious stones were glued in with natural resins. Their sparkle. When they smiled, literal. The pain tolerance astronomical. Filed teeth were also fashionable, shaped into sharp points or symmetrical patterns to mimic animal traits, suggesting strength or divine connection. Skin and face painting played a major role in daily life and ritual. Aztec women often wore red and yellow pigments in their cheeks, while both men and women used black paint for ceremonies. The colors weren't random. They had meaning. Red was for life and fertility. Black often signified war or devotion. Some paints were made from crushed insects like cochineal, giving a vibrant crimson hue. Piercings and tattoos were spiritual commitments. Ear, nose, and lip piercings were common, often adorned with jade or bone jewelry. Tattoos created with thorns and ink displayed in family lineage, religious role, or even battlefield honors. These weren't subtle accessories. They were declarations of loyalty to gods like Quetzalcoatl or Ixchel. Even crossed eyes were considered. Attractive among the Maya, mothers dangled beads in front of their infants' noses, training them to look inward until their eyes misaligned. This wasn't seen as a defect, but as a sign of mystical insight. Across the vast and varied landscapes of ancient Africa, beauty was as diverse as Theterrain itself. From the lush Nile Valley to the Savas of Nubia and the trade cities of West Africa, beauty rituals were both practical and profoundly symbolic. Adornment wasn't just a matter of style. It was a statement of identity, status, and even cosmic alignment. Let's begin. In ancient Egypt, where beauty was practically a science, both men and women wore kohl around their ears, not just for allure, but as protection. The black pigment made from galena or lead sulfide reduced sun glare and warded off infections. The dramatic lines extended beyond the lids, creating the famous almond-eyed look of Egyptian art. Eyes weren't just mirrors of Thesaul. They were sacred instruments, channels to the divine. Perfume was a luxury and a necessity. Egyptians loved scent so much that they created perfume cones. Wax cones infused with myrrh, cinnamon, and lotus oil that were worn on the head during ceremonies. As the cone melted in the heat, it released fragrance coating the hair and body. Daily hygiene included scented oils after bathing, often applied with stone or alabaster jars that were art pieces in themselves. Skincare was rooted in both beauty and climate survival. Palm oil, shea butter, and castor oil were used to protect their skin from harsh sun and dryness. These oils weren't just moisturizing, they were medicinal. Mixed with herbs, they healed wounds, soothed rashes, and preserved the skin's glow. Body scrubs were made from sand or crushed seeds, keeping skin exfoliated and clean long before loofahs were invented. In Nubia, hairstyles were central to identity. Elaborate braids and shaved patterns told stories of tribe, age, and marital status. Hair was often dyed with henna or decorated with beads, shells, and gold threads. A towering-styled coif was more than fashionable. It was regal. Further west, in ancient Yoruba or Sanghae territories, body painting using indigo and ochre pigments played a role in rituals and celebrations. Tribal markings, either scarified or painted, were not seen as blemishes, but body enhancements and markers of strength and heritage. Beauty has always demanded something in return: time, effort, money. But in the ancient world, it could also demand your health, your sanity, and even your life. Across civilizations, the pursuit of perfection often crossed into dangerous territory. While these rituals were admired and even worshipped, they sometimes left scars far deeper than the cosmetic. We've already seen the chill ingredients: lead, arsenic, mercury, and crushed insects, all used in makeup and skinner. What these substances had in common was toxicity. Lead face powders used in Rome, Greece, and later Renaissance Europe caused hair loss, muscle paralysis, and slow organ failure. And yet, the paler your skin, the higher your desirability. It was a poison wrapped in a compliment. In ancient China, women of the elite class once bound their feet from an earlier guy in pursuit of the so-called lotus foot, an ideal that symbolized grace and obedience. Though foot binding became more dominant during later dynasties, early iterations of similar practices already existed. The result was permanent deformity, but it wasn't considered cruelty. It was considered beauty. Let's not forget the ritualized pain of tattoos, piercings, and body modifications. For the Maya and Aztecs, inserting jade into your teeth or reshaping your skull was seen as a mark of honor, but the risk of infection, pain, and permanent damage was high. Likewise, in ancient African and Middle Eastern cultures, scarification was a sign of strength and beauty, but involved cutting intricate patterns into skin, often without antiseptics. Even perfumes could be dangerous. In Egypt, perfume cones often included ingredients like cinnamon oil, which in high concentrations can burn the skin, and since bathing with water was a luxury, heavy oils could trap dirt and bacteria, leading to infections. Cosmetics and treatments weren't regulated or standardized. One person's beauty secret was another's slow demise, and since many rituals were passed down by word of mouth or inscribed in secretive texts, misinformation was as common as vanity itself. In every culture, the pursuit of beauty reflected values of the time: power, divinity, nobility, virtue, but the cost. It was often paid in silence. The scars were hidden beneath powders, perfumes, and elaborate hairstyles. Long before monopoly ruined family dinners, the people of ancient Mesopotamia were already obsessed with board games, especially one called the Royal Game, off discovered in the 1920s by British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley in the Royal Cemetery. Of this game dates back over 4,500 years. But it wasn't just some idle diversion tucked away in a dusty corner. It was sacred, symbolic, possibly even cosmic. The game's board itself is a masterpiece. A small rectangular box with 20 decorated squares made of lapis lazuli shell andrade limestone, inlaid in bitumen. Imagine something that looked less like your toy and more like a divine artifact. Players moved their pieces using tetrahedral dice, four-sided pyramid shapes, to race from one end of the board to the other. The goal: get all 7 of your pieces off the board before your opponent. Sounds simple enough, but the deeper you look, the more layered it becomes. Some scholars believe the layout represents a spiritual journey, a metaphor for the soul's progress through fate and chaos. The middle squares were thought to be dangerous or magical places of chance, protection, or divine judgment. In this view, winning wasn't just about luck. It was about navigating the cosmos wisely, like threading a needle through the will of the gods. And speaking of gods, yes, they were involved. Clay tablets from later periods describe how people used the game for divination. Scribes would consult dice throws and interpret them as omens, using the game as a sort of oracle. Think of it as sentient tarot by way of competitive backgammon. The royal game wasn't just played in temples or palaces. Versions of it have been found as far away as India and Egypt, suggesting it spread along trade routes and captivated multiple cultures. It may have been the first truly international board game long before chess or checkers were even invented. For the ancient Sumerians, playing the royal game wasn't merely about killing time. It was about confronting fate, testing divine favor, and perhaps glimpsing the hidden structure of the universe. It was a game, yes, but also a ritual, a race, and a rehearsal for eternity. Senet wasn't just a board game. It was a passport to the afterlife. Played as early as 3100 BCE, Senet appears in tomb paintings, Aery texts, and even on the laps of pharaohs like Tutankhamun. To the ancient Egyptians, Senet wasn't merely for entertainment. It was a ritual simulation of the soul's journey through the underworld, where every move on the board could echo through eternity. The Senet board consisted of 30 squares arranged in 3 rows of 10. Each player had 5 or 7 pieces, and the object was to move them across the board and safely off the final square. The twist: movement was determined by casting sticks or bones, which acted as rudimentary dice, but luck alone wouldn't win you the game. Strategy and timing were essential. What began as a casual pastime soon gained spiritual weight by the New Kingdom period around 1550 BCE. Cinethad evolved into something far more than a household diversion. It was now a symbolic enactment of the Sol's Voyagithra, the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Certain squares on the board came to represent key stages of that journey: rebirth, judgment, peril, purification. Each turn of the game wasn't just a gamble, it was an invocation of divine will. The iconography around set became increasingly mystical. Some boards were inscribed with hieroglyphs representing protective deities or spells. Square 26, for example, often symbolized the house of rebirth, while square 27 might be the house of happiness. Landing there could mean divine protection, while other squares spell a deli or even danger. The board became a microcosm of the afterlife, a spiritual obstacle course laid out in cedar and paint. Senet was also closely tied to the goddess Mahat, the embodiment of truth, justice, and cosmic order. Playing Senet well was a symbolic rehearsal for navigating the trials of the afterlife, where the soul would be weighed against the feather of Mahat. Win the game, and you might win immortality. Lose. Let's just say you'd better hope Simeon packed extra amulets in your tomb. So while Set may look like an ancient version of backgammon, it was McMore, part game, part theology, part guidebook to the netherworld. In Egypt, you didn't just play Sinet, you prayed through it. To the untrained eye, knucklebones looked like child's play, just a handful of oddly shaped bones tossed in the air. But in ancient Greece, it was far more than a simple pastime. It was a game of skill, chance, flirtation, and even divine symbolism. Whether in bustling Athenian marketplace or quiet temple courtyards, knucklebones clattered across stone floors, echoing laughter, rivalry, and ritual. The game was originally played using the small ankle bones of sheep or goats, known as a straggleoi. Unlike modern dice, these four-sided bones didn't roll in uniform patterns, making each throw unpredictable. Players tossed them into the air and tried to catch them on the back of their hand or land them in certain positions to score points. The rules varied by region and era, but the thrill was universal. It wasn't just kids who played. Adults, particularly women, adored it. Greek vases and sculptures often show young girls playing knucklebones in elegant robes, their faces full of concentration. For many, it was a game of elegance and dexterity, a kind of ancient fidget spinner meets social ritual. In fact, it was sometimes used as a courtship display where a graceful throw might catch the eye of a passing suitor. But there was also something deeper. The estragalloi were often linked to fate and the gods. Each side of the bone had a name and a numerical value which made them ideal for both gaming and divination. A good throw might be interpreted as a sign from the gods, perhaps even a message from Apollo or Hermes. And if you threw 4 of Thesum's side, that was the coveted Venus throw, a win so perfect it was said Tobe touched by divine favour. The game also had strong ties to death and the afterlife. Knuckle bones were often placed in graves as toys or tools for divination in the next world. Some believed spirits could play through thema that they helped the dead predict the future. Eventually, the game evolved. Greeks began casting knucklebones made of bronze, glass, and ivory. But the core appeal remained. It was easy Tolian, hard to master, and steeped in mystique. In Greece, knucklebones were more than a game. They were flirtation, fate, and fun all rolled into a single toss. If chess is war on a board, then ludus latrinulum was Rome's declaration of battle. This ancient Roman game often shortened to latrinuli. What the game of little soldiers wasn't just a way to pass time in a villa courtyard. It was an intellectual sparring match, a brainy rehearsal for real-world conflict. To play it well was to think like a general. The exact rules of ludus latrinarum have been lost to time, but enough fragments, wooden boards, clay pieces, and literary references remain to paint a compelling picture. Plato in a grid, often 88 or 98 10 squares, each player controlled an army of smaliuniform pieces called latronus or mercenaries. The objective, outmaneuver your opponent and capture their pieces by surrounding them. No dice, no luck, just cunning. What made it thrilling was its subtlety. This wasn't a race game like or set. It was tactical, demanding foresight and psychological. Warfare, players would bait, feint, and trap, just like in actual military campaigns. Roman authors like Varro and Oid mention it as a pastime favoured by both soldiers and statesmen. Some saw it as a test of character. Others just liked humiliating their friends in front of a crowd. Interestingly, the game wasn't confined to the Elite, latrine boards have been found scratched into stones, floors, and even rooftops across the Ottoman Empire from Britain to Egypt. Soldiers played it while stationed on the frontier. Merchants played it between negotiations. It transcended class and culture, offering both escape and strategic training. The pieces themselves varied. Simple pebbles, carved ivory tokens, or glass counters. Some boards featured special squares, possibly fortresses or thrones where key captures could occur. Scholars debate whether a single king piece existed in some versions, but regardless, the game rewarded ruthless logic over brute strength. Roman poets often used the game as a metaphor. Losing a piece was like losing favor in court, getting surrounded like a political betrayal. Even the gods were said to play versions of it, suggesting that strategy was not just human, but divine. Ludus Lunalorum may be extinct, but its spirit survives in modern games like chess and checkers. It was Rome's intellectual blood sport, a game where a victory meant more than bragging rights. It meant superiority of mind before Senate reigned supreme. In ancient Egypt, there was Mayhem, a mysterious visceral-shaped board game named after a protective serpent god. Mayhem wasn't just a game. It was a riddle wrapped in mythology, strategy, and ceremony. While the exact rules have vanished into the sands of time, the surviving boards and game pieces suggest that Mayhem was more than just recreation. It was cosmic symbolism in motion. The board itself was striking, a coiled serpent, its body segmented into rectangular spaces, spiraling inward toward the head. The serpent, Mayhem, was believed to protect the sun god Ra during his nightly journey through the underworld. So in essence, each game was a reenactment of a divine voyage. Players navigating the coils of danger, transformation, and rebirth. The pieces discovered alongside me boards include small lion-shaped token sand round marbles or spheres. Scholars believe each player controlled a set of marbles that travelled through the serpent's body, possibly escorted or threatened by the lion figures. The lions may have acted as guardians, obstacles, or even competitive etiquettes. While it's unclear exactly how movement worked, it likely involved dice or casting sticks as with other Egyptian games. What makes me so fascinating is its rapid disappearance. Popular during the Old Kingdom around 2600 to 2300 BCE, it abruptly vanished from records and archaeological finds by the Middle Kingdom. Why? No one knows. Some theorize that its religious associations fell out of favor. Others believe it was simply overshadowed by Sonate's growing role in rewrites. Either way, Mayhem became a relic, leaving behind only beautiful serpent-shaped boards and silent lion-headed pieces. Its presence outside Egypt is equally intriguing. Similar spiral boards have been found in Cyprus and the Levant, suggesting the game, or at least its imagery, travelled through trade or conquest. Did it retain its symbolic meaning in foreign lands, or was it stripped of myth and reduced to a puzzle? The evidence doesn't say, but the mystery only adds to Mayhem's allure. In the end, Mayan was more than a pastime. It was a walk along the divine spine of a serpent, a metaphor for protection, risk, and the eternal cycle of life and death. To play it was to enter a spiral, one where each move chode with myth. Long before the Vikings wrote sagas or carved runous stones, they played Tafel, a family of asymmetric board games that mirrored their brutal world of raids, sieges, and survival. From frozen longhouses in Norway to trading ports in Ireland, Tafel games were spread across the Norse world, sharpening minds as swords. These were not gentle pastimes. Tafel was warfare distilled into strategy, deception, and calculated risk. The most famous version is Hartafel, or King's Table, played on a square grid that varied in size, most commonly 1-1-1 or Thran T13. The asymmetry is the game's signature. One player commands a king and a small group of defenders in the center of the board. The other controls a larger army of attackers on the edges. The king's goal, escape to a corner square. The attacker's goal, capture the king by surrounding him on all 4 sides. There are no dice, no luck, only logic, planning, and brute positional play. And just like in Viking raids, the odds are not even. The attackers outnumber the defenders 2-1, forcing the king's player to think like a desperate leader, constantly evading, redirecting, and outwitting the enemy. Tafel boards were often carved from wood, antler, or even stone, with intricate grid patterns and stylized playing pieces. Wealthier might own versions made of glass or bone, with figures shaped like warriors, kings, or dragons. The boards were portable, easy to carry on long ships, and the rules, though regional, shared the same heartbeat: conflict. It wasn't just entertainment. Tafel trained Viking minds for real-world leadership and ambush tactics. It taught when to retreat, when to sacrifice, and how to think several moves ahead. In an age where alliances shifted like wind on the fjords, the ability to anticipate your opponent could mean the difference between glory and death. Tafel was so embedded in Norse culture that even Christian missionaries used it to connect with pagans, some at Mesprelling the kingpiece with a bishop. But as chess spread into Scandinavia during the medieval period, Tafel began to fade, seen as a relic of the old gods. By the 12th century, it was nearly extinct, though echoes of it still survive in regional games like Tablet Dot. In its prime, however, Tafel was more than a board game. It was a Viking battlefield, just quieter, cleaner, and played with bone instead of blood. In the grand courts of ancient India, amid elephants, incense, and sacred chants, agami was being played, not just for fun, but for fate. Passi, known as the national game of India, was more than just a pastime. It was a cosmic dance of karma, kingship, and calculated risk. With origins dating back to at least the 6th century CE and possibly earlier, Pachi was a favourite of emperors, especially the legendary Akbar the Great, who didn't just play it, he lived it. The game board is shaped like a giant cross, symbolising the 4 cardinal directions and the intersection of fate. Each arm of the cross forms a path off squares converging at a central square representing the throne or home. Players race their 4 pieces around the board, trying to return them all to the center before their opponents. The twist: movement is determined by throwing 6 or 7 carry shells, not dis. The number of shells landing open side up dictates the movement, so every turn blends chance, choice, and divine whim. But Pachi isn't just about movement, it's about capture. Land on an opponent's piece, and you send them back to the beginning. Timing, positioning, and bluffing are everything. A rash move can lead to disaster. A patient strategy can dominate the board. It's a game of nerves, much like the chess offer or the politics of court life. And yes, it was played in real life. Literally, Akbar famously built a massive courtyard version of the board at Fataparik where real people dressed in colour-coded clothing acted as game pieces. He played from above, moving human tokens with royal authority. It was spectacle, statecraft, and spiritual theatre all rolled into one. Paka symbolic layers run deep. The cross-shaped board reflects the intersection of Dharma, duty, Artha, prosperity, karma, desire, and Moxia, liberation. Success requires not just skill, but alignment with universal order. A good game, like a good life, balances risk and restraint. Later, British colonists adapted Pak into Ludo, flattening its symbolism into something more digestible. But the original game remains a masterpiece of ancient Indian thought. Pachi was more than a race. It was a lesson in destiny, patience, and the subtle dance of calm across a board where every throw mattered. If you were an Aztec, rolling the bones weren't just a gamble. It was a spiritual transaction. Party, one of Mesoamerica's oldest known games, was part gambling, part ritual, and part cosmic drama. It was played everywhere, from humble village corners to the great temples of Tenos, Tightlan, and always under Thuich of the gods, especially Mweel, the patron of games, dance, and excess. The game board was simple in appearance, a cross-shaped grid, typically drawn on mats, stone, or even carved directly into temple steps. It contained 52 spaces mirroring the Aztec calendar cycle of 52 years. This wasn't accidental. Time, fate, and cosmic cycles were embedded in every square. Players began with 6 beans marked with dots, functioning like primitive dice. These were thrown to determine how many spaces a player's token could move. Each player had a set of markers, often stones, bones, or carved figurines that they maneuvered around the board in an effort to complete a circuit before their opponent. But polo wasn't just a race. It was a duel. Land on an opponent's piece and you could send it back to the start or worse, eliminate it completely, but danger worked both ways. Certain squares were penalty spaces tied to battlements where landing meant forfeiting progress or goods. That's right, goods, because Patali wasn't just played for pride. It was a full-blown gambling event. Players bet everything from food and blankets to gold dust, jade, and even slaves. High-stakes games could get intense. Spectators would gather. Cheering or jeering and priests sometimes oversaw matches to ensure fairness and spiritual propriety. Players made offerings to McKilks before major games, asking for luck or forgiveness in case of loss. To play poli was to risk not only wealth but divine disfavor. The Spanish upon arriving were horrified. They saw poli as a gateway to vice and paganism. Gambling was outlawed and boards destroyed, but the game lingered in memory, passed on secretly, or morphed into less dangerous variants. What made Party unique wasn't just its mechanics, viewed its fusion of luck, strategy, and cosmology. The board was a miniature universe. Each throw was a spin of fate, and every game mirrored the eternal gamble between order and chaos. Life and loss. To modernize, games are usually seen as leisure, something to unwind, compete, or kill time. But in the ancient world, games were often sacred. They weren't just entertainment. They were mirrors of the cosmos, training grounds for rulers, and rehearsals for death, fate, and rebirth. Across civilizations, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, play was never just play. It was ritual in disguise. Take Senate and Party, for instance. These weren't casual pastimes. They were embedded with religious meaning, often played in temples, tombs, and ceremonial contexts. Senate boards were found in the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs, not as toys, but as tools to guide the soul through the DUAT, the underworld. Winning a Senate game wasn't about outsmarting your opponent. It was about proving your spiritual readiness for thief to life. Likewise, in the Aztec world, Party was played under divine surveillance. Chit, the god of games and excess, demanded offerings and observance. The throws of beans weren't just lucky or unlucky. They were messages from the gods, signs of favor or punishment. Losing your possessions could be seen as karmic justice. Winning, a momentary alignment with cosmic forces. Even more abstract games like Mayhem and Patchy carried rich symbolic weight. Mayhem reenacted the serpent god coiled around the sun god Ra during his nightly journey through the underworld. Every movement on the board symbolized protection, progress, or peril. Patchacy with its cross-shaped layout weren't just about reaching the center. It was a model of Dharma, Karma, and Moksha. The entire spiritual cycle rendered in cowrie shells and tokens. And her role of games in education and warcraft can't be overstated. Games like Ludus Latrinalorum and Taffel weren't just distractions for soldiers. They were tactical simulations. Emperors, generals, and young nobles played them not just to win, but to learn. Games trained the mind to anticipate moves, counter threats, and balance aggression with strategy. They forged leaders in silence, away from the battlefield. So whether they were rolled in temples, chanted in courts, or carved into stone, ancient games served multiple roles. They amused, yes, but they also taught, healed, judged, and prepared. They connected humans to the divine, players to fate, and time to eternity. In the ancient world, when you sat down to play, you weren't escaping life. You were living it deeper. Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin entered the world on August 30, 1797, with more pressure in her first breath than most feel in a lifetime. She was born into an intellectual earthquake. Her parents, Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin, were two of the most radical thinkers of their time. Her mother was the author of A Vindication of the Rights of Women, a fiery feminist treatise that dared togy women were rational beings worthy of education and equality. Her father was a political philosopher and novelist who rejected monarchy, organized religion, and traditional marriage. Together they formed one of the most revolutionary unions in Enlightenment England. And then, 11 days after Mary's birth, her mother died. From the beginning, Mary's life was marked by brilliance and loss. Raised by her father in a house filled with books, ideas, and visiting radicals, she grew up surrounded by the ghost of a mother she never knew, but whose voice rang through the pages of her writing. Her father did not hide these works. He encouraged Mary to read them. Her education was anything but ordinary. She absorbed Greek myths, science, poetry, philosophy, and history before most children had learned to write a paragraph. The garden became her classroom. Her thoughts were fed by the likes of Cage, Rousseau, and Voltaire. But the household was far from idyllic. William Godwin eventually remarried, and Mary's relationship with her stepmother, Mary Jane Clement, was cold and contentious. The new Mrs. Godwin favoured her own children and viewed Mary as a moody, defiant girl with too much imagination. Mary, for her part, despised the domestic expectations placed on her and found solace only in writing and dreaming. By age 10, she was scribbling her own stories. By 14, she was reading books most adults would fear to touch. She was not a girl built for embroidery and tea. She was a storm quietly gathering strength. Mary's childhood framed by the ideals of political revolution, personal freedom, and feminist. Rebellion laid the foundation for a life unlike any other. Her origins were haunted by death, defined by genius, and forged in fire. She was not simply her parents' daughter. She was already Beko Mingsaming's stranger and far more powerful. Mary Shelley, the future mother of science fiction. In the summer of 1814, Mary Godwin, just 16 years old, did something that would ignite scandalacrous literary London. She ran away, but not alone. She eloped with the already married, wildly idealistic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, a man 5 years her senior, who was both her father's admirer and his greatest disappointment. What began as a romantic rebellion would soon unravel into grief, exile, and artistic fire. Mary met Percy in her father's home, where the poet often visited to debate philosophy and pay homage to Godwin's writings. But it was Mary, not her father, who enchanted him. Quiet yet intense, she shared Percy's fascination with liberty, science, and the supernatural. They read together by her mother's grave in St. Pancras Churchyard, where she would often retreat to be near the woman she'd never known. It was there, between headstones and candlelit books, that their love story began. Their departure was abrupt and reckless. Mary Percy and Mary's stepsister, Claire Claremont, left England and sailed across the Channel to France with barely a change of clothes and no clear plan. Percy abandoned his pregnant wife, Harriet, a decision that would haunt all of them. The trio wandered through revolutionary France and Switzerland on foot, writing in their journals by day and sleeping in flea-bitten inns by night. Their money ran out quickly, forcing them back to England in disgrace. What followed was a spiral of hardship. Percy's creditors hounded them. Mary's father, once the voice of free love, shunned her, and the children began toady. Mary gave birth to a daughter who died within weeks. Dreamed that my little baby came to life again, she wrote in her journal. Awake and find no baby. Grief had entered her bloodstream, and it never left. Yet through the turbulence, Mary's mind sharpened. She was reading voraciously Greek myths, alchemy, galvanism, scientific theories about reanimation. She was living in exile, a radical woman in a conservative world. Her relationship with Percy was both intoxicating and exhausting. He was brilliant, erratic, emotionally distant, yet passionately supportive of her writing. Mary Shelley had become an outcast, but she was no victim. Her life, already overflowing with rebellion and heartbreak, was laying the groundwork for something extraordinary. And in just a few short years, on the shores of Lake Geneva, lightning would strike. In the summer of 1816, Mary Godwin, now Mary Shel, found herself at the heart of one of literary history's most infamous vacations. She was in Switzerland staying at the Villa Diodati by Lake Geneva with her lover Percy Shelley, her stepsister Claire Claremont, the notorious Lord Byron, and Byron's physician John Polidori. The weather was miserable thanks to the eruption off Mount Tambora the year before. The skies were choked with ash. Crops failed. Temperatures dropped. It became known as the year without a summer. Trapped indoors, the group passed the time telling ghost stories and discussing science, poetry, and philosophy. One night, Byron proposed a challenge. Each person should write their own supernatural tale. A creative storm began to brew, one that would change literature forever. Mary was just 18. Byron and Shel were already poets. Polidori would go on to write The Vampire, a precursor to Dracula. But it was Mary, quiet and observant, who would shatter expectations. At first, she struggled to come up with an idea. Days passed. Then, during a conversation about galvanism, the use of electricity to reanimate dead tissue, something clicked. That night, Mary had a vision. In her words, I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out. She had dreamed of a scientist and the monster he brought to life. Thus was born Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. The novel wasn't just horror. It was a fusion of science, myth, and grief. Victor Frankenstein's obsession with creating life mirrored the AG's fascination with scientific progress. The creature, shunned and unloved, reflected Mary's own feelings of abandonment and otherness. Themes of parenthood, isolation, and guilt bled onto every page, drawn from her losses and the chaotic men around her. When Frankenstein was published in 1818, it was anonymous. Many assumed Percy had written it. He had penned the preface. He was the husband. He was the man. But truth couldn't stay hidden. The world would come to know Mary Shel not only as the wife of a poet, but as the mother of science fiction. In one summer, she had taken lightning, death, and her own sorrow and made a monster that would never die. After the birth of Frankenstein, Mary Shel's life didn't settle into literary triumph. Instead, it plunged deeper into sorrow. Death had always circled her, but in the years following 1818, it closed in relentlessly. Even as her creation began to walk in the public imagination, her own family began to vanish. Mary and Percy returned to England, where grief struck again. Their two young children, Clara and William, both died. Clara from dysentery in Italy, William from malaria shortly after. Mary was devastated. She had now lost 3 children in as many years. The pain was bottomless. She wrote, "I am not now in a state to be comforted." She isolated herself, her mind darkened by nightmares, and her health began to deteriorate. Yet amidst the sorrow, a glimmer of life emerged. In 1819, she gave birth to her only-serving child, Percy Florence Shelley. He would become her anchor in the years to come. But even he could not shield her from the next blow. In 1822, tragedy struck again. This time, brutally and suddenly, Percy Shel drowned in a storm while sailing off the coast of Italy. His body washed ashore, unrecognizable except for a volume of Keats' poetry in his pocket. Mary was just 24 years old, widowed, broke, and emotionally shattered. She had lived through the deaths of 3 children, her half-sister Frances, the suicide of Percy's arranged wife Harriet, and now the drowning off the love of her life. It was a gothic horror no fiction could rival, yet somehow she endured. Mary gathered Percy's remains, both literal and literary. She preserved his poems, his reputation, and even allegedly kept a piece of his calcified heart wrapped in silk stored in her writing desk. Grief was no longer just a companion. It was her constant muse, and through it all, she kept writing. Her pen became her lifeline. She composed Valperga, a historical novel, The Last Man, a post-apocalyptic vision of plague and desolation that eerily mirrored her own desolation. And she edited and published Shedpus's works, ensuring his legacy wouldn't drown with him. Mary Shel didn't just survive tragedy, she absorbed it, transformed it, and turned it into art. Love had defined her early years, but no loss would shape her myth. By the mid-1820s, Mary Shel was Alanine a way few young women of her era could. Imagine, at just 28, she had already buried most of the people she had loved. Her parents, her children, her half-sister, her husband. Watermain was her pen, her son, Percy Florence, and the crushing weight of legacy. She was no longer the radical teenager who fled England for love. She was now a widow, a single mother, and a woman surrounded by ghosts. And yet, she endured. Financially unstable, Marie relied on her writing to survive. But Victorian society wasn't kind to women who had lived too much. She was judged not only as a female author, but as the scandalous wife of a controversial poet. Publishers wanted her to be palatable, respectable. So she learned to navigate the literary world with care, balancing a radical past with the need to provide a stable life for her son. She wrote tirelessly novels like Perkin, Warbeck, Loder, and Fulner, each weaving themes of political exile, lost mothers, and moral conflict. They weren't as revolutionary as Frankenstein, but they reflected her evolving perspective, less idealistic, more grounded, and deeply introspective. She also produced biographies, travel journals, and countless editorial projects, including the monumental task of preserving and promoting Percy Shell's poetry. She shaped his legacy with the same diligence she once used to shape her stories. But Mary wasn't simply a reader of memories. She remained intellectually sharp, politically engaged, and fiercely protective of her privacy. She rejected multiple marriage proposals. She refused to publish, gossip, or expose secrets. She maintained friendships with writers, philosophers, and publishers, but trusted very few. Her greatest devotion was to her son, Percy Florence. She ensured he received the best education, protected him from scandal, and gave him the quiet life she herself had been denied. In doing so, she created a version of stability that had eluded her for decades. Mary's later life was marked by physical illness, recurring headaches, and paralysis in her right arm. But she never stopped writing, never stopped hinting, never stopped. Being the woman who had stared down grief and defied it with ink and paper, she was the last woman standing, not untouched by tragedy, but undefeated by it. Her life was no longer just a Gothic novel. It was an act of endurance. By the time Mary Shelley reached her 30s, she had become a quiet force in the literary world. Not through lewd acclaim, but through sheer persistence. She was no longer merely Percy Shel's widow or the daughter of famous radicals. She was Mary Shel, the author of Frankenstein, a novel that over time had begun to take on a strange life of its own. Frankenstein had first been dismissed by critics. Some saw it as a disturbing oddity. Others assumed it had been written by her husband, but the public couldn't look away. By the 1830s, the story had already begun evolving beyond the page. Theatre adaptations sprang up across Europe, including The Popular Presumption or The Fate of Frankenstein, which portrayed the creature as a mute brute, far from Mary's eloquent, tragic original. Still, it proved the novel's cultural power. Her monster was no longer just hers. It belonged to the world, and with that came something extraordinary. A new genre was beginning to form. Frankenstein had unknowingly birthed science fiction. Long before Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, Mary Shel had asked the terrifying question, what happens when man plays God? She had fused Gothic horror with Enlightenment-era science, threading human tragedy through speculative imagination. It wasn't just a horror story, it was a warning. Mary herself didn't claim to have invented a genre. In fact, she rarely called attention to herself at all. But scholars now regard her as the mother of science fiction, a title she earned not through intention, but innovation. She had taken the anxieties of her era about science, morality, motherhood, and death and molded them into a timeless bubble. As she edited Percy's works and navigated the male-dominated publishing world, Mary quietly influenced generations of thinkers. Her writings explored not only politics and feminism, but ecological disaster, existential dread, and ethical boundaries. Her 1826 novel, The Last Man, imagined a world ravaged by plague and loneliness, a vision that would only be fully appreciated a century later. Though ill for much of her later life, she never stopped engaging with the world through her writing. Her legacy was already in motion, creeping out off lab, across the stage, through the press, and into the bloodstream of modern culture. Mary Shel had breathed life into an idea that would never die. And for that, literature would never be the same. Mary Shel's life was shaped not only by love and loss, but by identity, an identity she was constantly forced to defend, reshape, and preserve. Being a woman writer in the 19th century was already a political act. Being Mary Shelley, the daughter of revolutionaries, the widow of a radical poet, and the creator of a morally complex monster, made her existence even more loaded. After Percy's death, Mary was left in a precarious position. Though she had taken his surname through their marriage, her status as his literary executive and the guardian of his legacy was not guaranteed. His family, the aristocratic Shelleys, had never approved of Mary. They viewed her with suspicion, considered her dangerous, and offered her a meagre allowance on the condition that she stay out of their affairs. They allowed her to raise her son, but not to speak too freely. Mary played a long and careful game, shadowed the line between respectability and rebellion, crafting a public persona that was quiet, literary, and maternal, while still protecting her radical lineage beneath the surface. When editing Percy's poetry and writing his memoirs, she subtly sanitized his atheism and revolutionary views, ensuring that his works could reach a wider, more conservative Victorian audience. Critics have debated this move for decades. Was it betrayal or strategy? Perhaps it was both. Mary understood the politics of reputation better than most, but while she worked to preserve Percy's legacy, she also fought for her own. Publishers wanted her to be silent, anonymous, or at best, the footnote to her husband's genius. Mary refused. She continued writing novels under her own name. In an era when women were still publishing under male pseudonyms, Mary Shel insisted on visibility. At the same time, she quietly inserted political themes into her fiction. In Low War and Fulner, She explored issues of male autonomy, flawed fatherhood, and the social limitations placed on women. In The Last Man, she imagined the collapse of civilization and the futility of empire, hardly subtle commentary. Mary Shel's pen was not just a creative tool. It was a weapon. Through fiction, biography, and quiet editorial work, she shaped not only the memory of a generation, but the framework of modern literature. As the Victorian era bloomed around her, Mary Shell entered her final decade with a quiet dignity shadowed by physical decline and emotional isolation. Though she was still recognized for her intellect and literary contributions, the world that had once swirled with radicalism and romanticism was fading, and Mary was one of its last living witnesses. The vibrant serie of Harriet, Byron, Percy, Clare, even her father, William Godwin, were gone. The revolutionary fire of the early 1800s had given way to Victorian restraint. Mary found herself increasingly alone, burdened by chronic illness. She suffered from debilitating headaches, partial paralysis in her arms, and what may have been a recurring brain tumor. Yet, she rarely complained. Her pain was simply folded into her routine like ink into paper. Still, she remained committed to her son, Percy Florence Shel, who had grown into a beautiful and affectionate young man. Unlike his parents, Percy Florence lived a conventional life, eventually inheriting the baronets he denied to his father. Mary clung to his companionship, focusing her remaining energy on ensuring his success and protecting him from scandal, especially the ghosts that still followed the Shelley name. Though her days of bold creation were behind her, Mary kept working. She maintained cadrenson with publishers, friends, and fellow intellectuals. She continued reading widely, history, science, political theory, remaining intellectually engaged. Even as her body betrayed her, she kept editing Percy's works, carefully curating his poetic legacy, while tiptoeing around the more incendiary pieces to preserve public favour. But the shadows never fully lifted. She lived modestly, sometimes on the edge of poverty, and never married. Marriage to Mary was never about security. It had been about passion and shared ideals. No one else could fill the space Percy had occupied, nor would she allow them to try. In 1851, at the age of 53, Mary sheltered of what was likely a brain tumour. She passed quietly, surrounded by Herson and his wife. After her death, they found among her belongings locks of hair from her lost children and the rumoured piece of Percy Shel's heart wrapped in silk. Even in death, Mary Shel remained the keeper of memory, a woman shaped by loss, elevated by genius, and driven to write through every shadow. Mary Shel died in 1851, but her voice never went silent. In the decades that followed, her work, especially Frankenstein, grew beyond her wildest imagination. What began as a ghost story by a teenage runaway became one of the most influential novels in human history. Mary Shel wasn't just remembered. She was resurrected again and again. At first, her fame lingered quietly. During a lifetime, she had been praised mostly for her loyalty to Percy and her editorship of his poetry. Her round fiction, though respected, was often dismissed or misunderstood. Frankenstein was still seen as a curiosity filed under Gothic horror, its deeper themes ignored by a world not yet ready to question science, morality, and man's place in the universe. But time revealed her genius. By the 20th century, Mary's monster had become a cultural icon. Film adaptations, beginning with the silent era and exploding with Universal's 1931 Frankenstein, starring Boris Karloff, gave her creation a new face. Literally, the creature became a misunderstood symbol of modern anxiety, a tragic being forged by human arrogance and cast out by society. Each adaptation reflected the fears of its time: war, technology, nuclear power, artificial intelligence, and always at the core, Mary Shel's fingerprints. Scholars began to revisit her work with new eyes. Feminist critics championed her not just as the wife of a poet, viewed as a literary architect in her own right. They explored her insights into motherhood, grief, creation, and power. The Last Man, once overlooked, was re-evaluated as an early dystopian masterpiece. Her life itself, marked by rebellion, intellect, and endurance, became as fascinating as her fiction. Today, Mary Shel is not just remembered, she is revered. She is called the mother of science fiction, the queen of Gothic literature, a pioneer who fused the personal with the philosophical. Her legacy lives on in classrooms, laboratories, film studios, and political discourse. Whenever we ask what it means to be human or what happens when creation outruns conscience, we're speaking in her language. She gave us a monster, viewed and doing. So she gave voice to every outsider, every orphaned idea, every mind cast out for being too curious. Mary Schell didn't just write a novel. Sherwood Literature's DNA. My grandma gave me a penthouse for my birthday, but my mum tried to take it away to please her new husbandi everyone. 3 days ago I turned 15, and my grandma gave me the most unbelievable gift. She signed over the deed to her penthouse. Apartment to me. She doesn't even live there full time. She has a house in the suburbs and only stays in the penthouse when she comes into the city. I was over the moon. It felt like, for the first time in a long while, something good was happening in my life, because honestly, this last year has been absolute hell. It started when my dad walked out. He'd always been a complete workaholic, barely around, but the divorce still blindsided me. My mum never even told me directly. One day, I just noticed he was gone. Later, I found out he had already filed for divorce almost a year before. By the time I realized what was happening, it was basically over. He didn't even say goodbye to me, just left me one last message, be good. That was it. I haven't seen him since. When the divorce finalized, Mum got the house and full custody of me and my little brother. Dad technically had visitation rights, but he never used them. He just vanished from my life. Then, about 2 months ago, Mum dropped another bomb. She'd been dating someone, let's call him Robert, for a few months, and now they were engaged. I barely had time to process that she was even seeing someone before she announced he'd be my stepdad. It felt rushed, forced, and honestly pretty desperate. How do you even know someone well enough in 5 months to marry them? When I finally met him, he seemed distant and cold with me. With my 4-year-old brother though, completely different. Playful, warm, like he was auditioning for best stepdad ever. At first, I brushed it off as him just being more comfortable with little kids. But a couple of weeks later, Mum sat me down and told me the real reason behind their whirlwind. Engagement. Robert had been offered a new job in another state. They were moving, and here's the kicker, they planned to take my little brother, but leave me behind. With my grandma, when I asked why, Mum basically admitted it was Robert's idea. He wanted my brother because he was still young enough to bond with, but me? At 15, I was too old to ever become his real daughter. Plus, apparently, I'd upset him when I said 5 months wasn't long enough to know someone before marrying them. He decided I was stuck in the past and would never accept him, and my mum agreed. She told me I'd be better off staying with grandma. That it would be easier. I can't describe the pain I felt in that moment. My dad had already abandoned me, and now my mum was essentially choosing her new husband over me. I love my grandma dearly, and moving in with her wasn't the issue. She's the kindest, most compassionate woman I know, but to hear my own mother say I wasn't wanted, that crushed me. I told her I didn't want to wait until the move. I wanted to live with grandma immediately. Within a few days, I'd packed my things and left. Those last couple of days at Mum's house were silent. I didn't speak to her, didn't hug her goodbye. Honestly, I didn't think she deserved it. The only person I said goodbye to was my little brother, because I knew I'd miss him like crazy. Now I'm at grandma's and life already feels lighter. She shows me real love, not conditional affection based on what some guy thinks. Even though the commute to school is longer, I don't care. It's worth it. Every night I call my brother to talk before bed. It hurts that I can only reach him through Mum, but I do it anyway for him. For the first time in months, I feel like I might actually be okay. I don't really talk to my mum anymore. We only speak when it's absolutely necessary. 3 days ago, I had my birthday, but honestly, it wasn't me who organized anything. My grandma secretly put everything together. She found a couple of my close school friends through my Facebook, invited them along with some relatives, and surprised me with a little party at her house. I hadn't expected anything, so it lifted my spirits a bit, especially after how down I'd been ever since Mum sent me to live with grandma. But after we cut the cake, grandma announced her gift to me and I was completely stunned. She told everyone that for now, her lawyer would act as trustee of her apartment, but the moment I turn 18, full ownership will pass to me. It was the best news I'd gotten in ages. I didn't even think of telling my mum about it. Turns out, someone else did. Yesterday I found out that one of the party guests must have told her. That evening, Mum called me, sounding way too cheerful for someone about to drop a bomb. She said she knew about grandma's gift and that after talking With Robert, her husband, they decided he wanted to adopt me. But there was a catch. I'd have to convince Grandma to transfer the deed into his name first. She genuinely expected me to be happy about this, as if it meant I could finally join them. I wasn't. I told her straight up that it would never happen and that she didn't need to call me anymore. Then I hung up. A few minutes later, she tried again, and when I didn't pick up, she sent me a long message. The summary? She said she was sorry if it upset me that she lives by Robert's rules, but I needed to understand that after her divorce, he was the only one who truly supported her emotionally and financially. She claimed Dad wasn't generous, that the divorce settlement and child support were laughable, and that she was lucky he at least left her the house. She admitted Robert wasn't nice to me, but excused it by saying his past relationships failed because of kids from earlier marriages. So I should be understanding. She also said she never abandoned me because she left me with Grandma, who she knew would take good care of me, and that now she'd arranged everything so I could finally come live with them. She ended the message with, "I know you're upset, but I know you love me and I love you. Just text back, I love you." At first, a small part of me felt bad reading it, but the ending made me furious. She wanted me to bend to Robert's demands just like she does. It was selfish, weak, and pathetic. Honestly, it felt like she had completely lost herself. Half an hour later, I texted back that I will never do what Robert wants, and if she wanted to leave with him, she should just leave me here with Grandma like she planned in the first place. I didn't feel like I had anything else to say because her behavior had disappointed me so much. When I told Grandma about it, she was firm. She would never, under any circumstances, sign the deed over to Robert. She barely knows him, doesn't trust him, and believes he'd sell the place right away, leaving me with nothing. Honestly, she's probably right, and I'm glad I stood my ground, but Mum wasn't ready to take no for an answer. This morning, while I was at school, she showed up at Grandma's with my little brother. When I got home, Grandma told me Mum had come to talk face to face about the offer I supposedly ignored. I made it clear I hadn't ignored anything I had already replied and made myself very clear. This is not happening. I want her to stick to her original plan because I'm not about to convince Grandma to sign over her property to Robert. We don't trust him, and I made that perfectly clear. So I honestly don't get why she keeps pretending not to understand. I was harsh and answered in a sharp tone, but can you really blame me? That's when Mum started crying, saying she just wanted to make everyone happy, but no matter what she does, it never works out. I was furious watching her sit in the living room sobbing, because in reality, I'm the one who should have been crying. I'm the one both of my parents walked away from. I told her to stop and said she had twisted everything. She wasn't trying to make everyone happy, she was just trying to make herself happy and expected everyone else to bend over backwards for that. Maybe others were willing to go along with it, but not me. I have my own life, and I wasn't going to ruin it chasing after her and making sure she's okay. That stunned her, and not long after, she left. Later, I realized she had blocked me, and now I feel guilty about what I said. So here's my question. Was I wrong for calling my Mum selfish and telling her she only cares about her own happiness? Update 1. Hi everyone. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented on my first post. Reading your replies really opened my eyes. You all pointed out things I hadn't even considered before. For example, it had never crossed my mind that my mum's relationship with Robert might have started before the divorce. Maybe she only admitted to it after the fact because it was easier that way. No one would suspect a thing once the divorce papers were signed. Honestly, I never even allowed myself to think my mum could cheat, but now, I'm not so sure. Either way, it doesn't matter anymore because she made it clear she doesn't want much to do with me. What really hurts is that I can't see or talk to my younger brother, and I miss him so much. We've always been close, and it breaks my heart that some of you might actually be right that Robert could be his real dad. I try not to think about it, but once the idea was planted, it's been hard to shake. I've talked to my grandma a lot over the past couple of days. Neither of us knows for sure, but it's definitely changed how we see Mum. I think talking to my dad might clear some things up, but I don't know if he'd even want to go there with me. It's been 4 days since Mum last came over, and we haven't spoken since. She blocked me the same day, and later Grandma told me she blocked her too. That's so ungrateful, especially considering Grandma takes care of me without asking Mum for child support. She doesn't need to, she has her own money. She's doing this out of love, giving up her retirement to raise me. Mum should be grateful, but instead, she cuts her off. I'm just filled with so much anger and so many questions I can't answer. I just hope that one day, the truth finally comes out. Update too high again. This one's going to be long because a lot happened tonight. My dad showed up. Apparently, Grandma had reached out to him, but she didn't tell me because she wasn't sure if he'd actually come and didn't want to give me false hope. As soon as he found out Mum was engaged to Robert, he decided to come. And when he arrived, he hugged me and said he was sorry. Honestly, that alone shocked me. Then he sat me and Grandma down and told us everything. He admitted that he and Mum had been falling out of love for a long time, but they stayed together for me. Neither of them wanted to break the family. Then, about 3 years ago, he started an affair with a co-worker. He said he wanted to confess, but never had the courage. Eventually, Mum found out about it about a year ago, and that's when she filed for divorce. Here's the kicker: Mum told him she'd keep it a secret as long as he stayed away from us. She gave him a whole list of conditions. He had to give her the house outright. She got full custody of me and my brother, though technically he still had visitation rights, but he could only see us if she allowed it. On top of that, she demanded huge child support payments and a large share of the marital property. And he agreed to all of it. The only thing he asked in return was that she never expose his affair to me, because he didn't want me to see him. As a chitter and hate him forever. So far, Mum had kept that secret, but the price was that I had no relationship with him. He also apologized for always being a workaholic, saying he never spent enough time with me or built a real bond, but he added that it wasn't only his fault. Mum always wanted more, and to keep up with the lifestyle she demanded, he had to work himself into the ground. He admitted that wasn't an excuse, but he wanted me to understand that the blame wasn't just on him. I guess I get that, but it's still a lot to process. Then he explained why he had broken his promise to her and showed up anyway. In the message my grandma left him, she had mentioned Robert and asked if Dad knew him. That's what made him rush over immediately. Not only did he know Robert, he knew exactly what kind of man Robert was, and he wanted to warn us. Turns out, my parents and Robert were all part of the same college group. Mum and Dad were already dating back then, but Robert had always been into her. Right before graduation, when they all went out drinking, Robert confessed his feelings. Mum rejected him since she was with Dad, but she only told Dad about it 2 weeks later, admitting she was confused about her feelings. That led to them taking a break for nearly 2 months. During that time, she even went on a couple of dates, including with Robert. It didn't last, and eventually she got back with Dad. When they reconciled, Dad asked her not to keep contact with Robert because it bothered him. At first, she agreed, but later that same year, he found out she had still been talking to him. It turned into a huge fight, almost breaking them up. Not long after, Robert actually showed up at Dad's place, and they ended up in a physical fight because Robert thought it would somehow impress Mum. Instead, it disgusted her, especially since she'd already made it clear she only wanted to be friends. After that, she cut him off completely. According to Dad, Robert was always unstable and a pretty awful person. After college, he left town, and no one heard from him for years. Dad suspects Mum and Robert reconnected a couple of years ago, since she once mentioned hearing he had moved back. He's not sure when they actually started seeing each other again, but the fact that they're engaged now basically proves she cheated too, which means all the divorce conditions she had forced on him technically lose their weight. Dad said he plans to confront her directly, but before doing so, he wanted me to meet with her myself and hear her side. He promised he'd wait and then act after I had my talk with her. Honestly, my head is spinning. I don't know who to believe. Neither of my parents has treated me well, and this whole situation is just one giant mess. Update 3: I finally talked to Mum. I didn't mention that I had already seen Dad, I just wanted to hear her version without her getting defensive. Since she had blocked me, the only option was to show up unannounced. Dad had come over 3 days ago, and yesterday I finally gathered the courage to face her. She looked shocked when she opened the door, but she did let me in. Luckily, Robert wasn't home, so we could talk privately. I started by apologizing, though honestly it was just to break the ice so she'd actually open up. I told her I was struggling to accept Robert so quickly after the divorce, and that's why I'd been acting the way I did. Then I got to the point. I said that the timing of everything felt way too convenient. Like it was just too neat that she suddenly met this perfect guy right after her marriage ended. That would have been the perfect chance for her to admit she had known Robert back in college, but she didn't. She just said she was lucky to run into him again. That was it. But I already knew Dad wasn't lying about them all knowing each other in college because he has photos. The only thing I still wasn't sure about were the finer details of his version of events. The moment Mum flat out lied to my face about never knowing Robert before, I realized who I should believe. But then she made it even worse for herself. She admitted she had no intention of ever telling me the truth, and the real reason she rushed into an engagement and moving in with Robert was because she wanted to erase everything connected to my dad, to wipe him completely out of her life, and then she went further. She told me about his affair, the very secret Dad had sacrificed everything to keep from me, the one she promised never to reveal. That was the breaking point. I didn't see any reason to keep talking. I just told her we'd see each other again sometime, and I left. As soon as I walked out of the house, I called my dad and told him he could do whatever he needed to do now, because I finally knew the truth. He hadn't lied to me. Mum had. So now she'd finally face the consequences. I'm not saying my dad suddenly became a saint or that all his mistakes are forgiven, but compared to my mum, he's not nearly as awful. Update for high again. A lot has happened since my last post. First, a question that's been eating at everyone, including me, is my brother actually my dad's son? The answer is yes. After Dad confronted Mum, they did a DNA test last month. Thankfully, it confirmed that my brother is his biological child. That gave Dad the confidence to go after full custody. Since I'm 15, I can officially declare that I want to live with Dad, and that will be taken into account legally. That being said, I'm still living with my grandma for now. Even though Dad is trying hard to make things right, there's still a lot between us we need to work through. I feel safest here with Grandma, and I'm not ready to move back in with him yet. Mum, of course, was furious when she realized my visit had been all about finding out the truth about her and Robert. She unblocked me once just to curse me out, then immediately blocked me again. We haven't spoken since .as for Robert. He dumped Mum almost as fast as he got engaged to her. Turns out, the whole time he was stringing her along, he lied about having a job offer. His actual plan was to try to worm his way into his uncle's failing business and live off my mum's money. That's also why he was pushing her to convince me to sign over the apartment Grandma had gifted me. They'd been together for 2 years, and all along he was just playing her. So now Mum's been scammed, dumped, and humiliated. Instead of admitting her mistakes, she goes around whining to her friends about Robert, not realizing they all laugh behind her back. That's actually how Dad found out the truth. Her friends spilled it, and honestly, I'm grateful. Grateful that Mum chose to push me out of her life the moment Robert told her to. It hurt at first, but now I see it was a blessing. So here we are. Dad and I have agreed to try to rebuild our relationship. He's promised to do better and be the kind of father I needed all along. And once he gets full or at least joint custody of my brother, we'll try to piece together some version of a family again. I don't know if we'll ever be a normal family, whatever that even means anymore, but maybe we can at least be a happy one. And for now, that's enough for me. I let my sister-in-law throw her baby shower at my house, but then she tried to kick me out of my own home during the party just to impress one of her wealthy friends. I told her husband what happened, and that ended up leading to their divorce. Now she's raising the baby alone. I'm 32, married for 3 years. My husband 35, and I have been together for 5 years, but he's currently working out of town, so we're basically in a long-distance situation. He comes home every other weekend. We recently bought a beautiful new house right next to my parents' place, so it's convenient for all of us. It's pretty big for just me, but I love the space. At our housewarming, everyone complimented it, especially my sister-in-law, Carrie 32. She couldn't stop gushing about it. Carrie and I aren't super close, but we've always gotten along. A couple weeks ago, she asked if she could have her baby shower at my house. I agreed without hesitation. She was pregnant. I didn't want to be rude, and honestly, I thought it might be nice to socialize a bit since I spend a lot of time alone. She said she didn't want to waste money renting a venue when I had such a perfect home for it. Her own house is fine, but smaller and not as impressive. I took her compliments at face value and agreed. For 2 weeks, she came over almost every day to plan things. I even took a day off work to help her. I work in finance, definitely not in event planning, but she kept treating me like her personal party coordinator. Still, I didn't mind because I thought this would bring us closer. I was wrong. On the day of the shower, I spent hours helping the decorator set everything up. Carrie arrived early, thanked me, acted totally normal. Then, 15 minutes before guests were supposed to arrive, she looked at me and asked, "So, where are you planning to spend the next couple of hours?" I was stunned. At first, I thought she was joking. I mean, it's my house. I was dressed for the event, had bought her a gift, and had been involved in planning everything. I asked if she was serious, and she calmly explained that I wasn't on the guest list. Apparently, she'd never intended for me to be there. She claimed she thought I was just helping out, like some kind of hired planner. She told me the shower was for close family and friends only, and that unfortunately, I didn't make the cut. She even asked me to leave before her guests arrived so I wouldn't cause a scene. I was furious, humiliated, and honestly heartbroken. I stormed outside to call my husband, but he was busy at work and couldn't pick up. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I decided to call Carrie's husband, Jim 33. I don't know him well. He's quiet and reserved, but I told him everything. How I'd let her use my house, helped plan the whole thing, and then how she tried to kick me out of my own home for her little exclusive party. He was silent for a long time after listening. I apologized for dumping all this on him, but I couldn't keep it in. I was so hurt. Jim finally said, very calmly, that I had nothing to apologize for and that under no circumstances should I be leaving my own house. It would have been ridiculous for me to leave. And Jim told me he was on his way over. He didn't want things to escalate between Carrie and me, and he didn't want her getting worked up while pregnant. That sounded reasonable, so I waited. 15 minutes later, before any of her guests arrived, Jim showed up. Carrie looked like she'd seen a ghost when he walked in. As soon as I heard the doorbell, I went back inside. We all stood in the living room, and Jim calmly but firmly told me I was absolutely welcome to stay for the shower. This was my house after all. Carrie tried to argue, but he gave her a sharp look and she went silent. She spent the whole evening glaring at me like she wanted me to vanish. I kept my cool and carried myself with dignity, but I quietly decided right then I was done with her. I even thought about cancelling the whole event out of spite, but I'd put too much time and effort into helping set it up. So I endured the evening and promised myself I'd never deal with Carrie again. After the shower ended, Jim apologized again for her behavior. Carrie didn't even look at me. He actually apologized for that too, saying she had no right to treat me that way. She was clearly bitter and thought I had forced myself into her special day, which was honestly insulting given it was happening under my own roof. Later that night, I told my husband everything. He was furious and wanted to call his sister immediately, but I asked him not to, at least not that night. I just wanted peace, but peace didn't last. The very next morning, my in-laws called me, fuming. Apparently, when Carrie and Jim got home, they had a huge blowout fight because Jim knew what she'd done to me. Now Jim had packed up and said he was done. He stopped speaking to Carrie entirely and even cut off communication with my in-laws. That shocked everyone, since Jim had always been close to her family. Their parents had even been old family friends. But suddenly, his side of the family blocked Carrie's parents everywhere: social media, phone, everything. And yet, somehow, this was all my fault. According to Carrie and my in-laws, if I had just kept quiet and gone along with her plan, none of this would have happened. They actually blamed me for ruining her marriage. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Carrie humiliated me in my own house, and I was the one being painted as the villain. I lost it. I told them straight up, I am not taking the blame for any of this. Carrie behaved horribly. I generously allowed her to host an event at my home for free, and in return, she tried to humiliate me by kicking me out of my own house, all because she didn't think I was close enough family. Excuse me, I'm literally her brother's wife. I reminded them that if my husband had been home, Carrie never would have dared to treat me that way. And I don't regret telling Jim the truth. He was the only reasonable adult in this mess. If he decided enough was enough and chose to walk away from his marriage, I trust his judgment. That's his choice, and it's not on me. But my in-laws won't stop harassing me. They keep saying I've ruined a family and that Carrie's baby will grow up without a father because of me. Honestly, that's just emotional blackmail. I'm close to blocking them completely. But the only reason I haven't is because sometimes their words do get in my head. They make me doubt myself, even though I know deep down I didn't do anything wrong. My husband, thankfully, is fully on my side. He told me I did nothing wrong, and he'll be the one to explain to his parents that Carrie caused this, not me. He says they should be supporting her instead of attacking me. But I'm just exhausted. I don't feel guilty at all, but they won't leave me alone, and all I want is for this drama to finally be over. Honestly, I still don't even understand why it mattered so much to Carrie that I wasn't at her baby shower. It never made sense to me. So, was I really wrong for telling her husband the truth about how badly she treated me? You can make up your own minds, but personally, I think I did the right thing. I don't see any reason why I should be the scapegoat here. Yes, it's tragic if their baby ends up growing up without a father, but if they couldn't fix their marriage anyway, that outcome was inevitable sooner or later. And let's be real, Carrie had zero interest in resolving things. If she had been willing to apologize, maybe there would have been a chance to work things out. Instead, she doubled down and pushed all the blame on me. That's just insane. Update 1 high again. It's been almost a week since the baby shower, and Carrie and Jim are officially getting divorced. This isn't speculation, Jim already announced it on his socials. I didn't think things would unravel this quickly, but apparently he's already filed and the process has started. He moved back in with his parents, and they've been living apart ever since. I wasn't sure if I should even reach out because I honestly felt guilty. But after talking with my husband, we agreed that someone from the family should at least check in, especially since Jim hadn't blocked us. Clearly, he left that door open for a reason. So I sent him a message just saying I was sorry that things had turned out this way. Not an apology for causing it, more like expressing sympathy. He actually reassured me, told me not to blame myself because their marriage had been hanging by a thread for a long time. After that, I asked him directly, why did Carrie hate the idea of me being there so much? Because they're only close relatives, excuse never added up. She'd invited plenty of people who weren't even family, people I knew she wasn't close with. So what was the real reason? Well, he told me. And wow, the truth was, Carrie had been desperate to impress one particular guest, an old school friend of hers who'd married into a very wealthy family. Carrie has been planning to start a business after the baby, and she was hoping this woman's wealthy husband might invest in it. Her entire baby shower plan was basically a performance for this one guest, and here's the kicker, she wanted to pretend my house was hers. That's why she didn't want me around. She thought she could host the event, claim the house was hers, and put on this illusion of being more successful than she really is. Obviously, she couldn't pull that off with me standing right there. As. It turned out that important friend didn't even show up because she got sick that day. But the fact remains Carrie was perfectly willing to lie, humiliate me, and use me just to keep up appearances. When Jim found out, he confronted her at home. She admitted it openly, like it was no big deal to fake an entire lifestyle just to impress someone from high school. Jim told her straight up she owed me an apology for treating me like trash after I'd been generous enough to host. She flat out refused, and that fight cracked open everything else. According to Jim, this wasn't new behavior. For the last couple of years, Carrie's been obsessed with pretending they're wealthier than they are, staging things for social media, putting on a front for acquaintances. He said it all started not long after their wedding, when some of her friends made snide comments about how modest their wedding was compared to others. Since then, she's been living in this fantasy of trying to look rich. Hearing this honestly blew my mind, but it also made everything click into place. Honestly, I think all those comments from her friends really got under Carrie's skin. But she's a grown woman, not a teenager. She shouldn't still be this obsessed with what other people think. Real friends don't mock you for not living a flashy lifestyle. If they do, maybe they're not worth keeping around. The thing is, Carrie and Jim aren't struggling at all. They live a perfectly normal, comfortable life. Sure, they're not wealthy, but they're fine. Jim works in real estate, and Carrie has a steady job at a marketing firm. She even had plans to launch her own business after the baby. If anything, she should have been saving up instead of spending recklessly. But Carrie's been fixated on projecting this glamorous image they simply can't afford. Jim said he tried countless times to explain this to her, that their life is good enough as it is, that they don't need to impress anyone. But she just brushed him off. Instead, she kept buying things without talking to him first, kept putting up a front. That put a constant strain on their marriage. He admitted he used to ignore it because he loved her so much. But with a baby on the way, he couldn't look past it anymore. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the kind of future they'd be able to give their child. After the baby shower fight, Jim finally snapped. He told me that even if I hadn't called him that day, he would have left sooner or later. The baby shower incident just sped things up. He doesn't blame me for anything, and honestly, I feel lighter knowing that. My husband and I talked it over too. He feels sorry for Carrie, of course, but he also thinks Jim wouldn't have walked away unless he'd thought it through. Jim was a good husband, and if he reached his breaking point, that says a lot. I do feel bad for Carrie, especially since she's pregnant, but at the end of the day, she dug herself into this. She's in her 30s, still acting like she's in high school, still letting shallow people dictate how she feels about her own life. She needs therapy more than she needs new designer bags. I honestly hope they figure something out, if only for their baby's sake, because growing up in a broken home is tough. For now, though, I'm stepping back. I've decided to block Carrie and my in-laws for the time being, not out of spite, but because I don't see anything good coming from staying involved. My husband agrees. We'll give them space and focus on our own lives. Update to so, my husband just got back a couple of hours ago and he filled me in. He's been in touch with Jim these past few days, and apparently Jim is open to giving their marriage another shot, but only if Carrie is willing to apologize and agree to go to therapy. My husband's been trying to get that message across to her, but so far she hasn't responded. His parents said she's avoiding everyone right now, just isolating because she's so upset, which honestly is understandable, but the ball's in her court now. .as for some of the comments on my last post, a lot of people called me selfish, saying my husband and I were greedy and should have been financially supporting Carrie and Jim. I honestly don't know how people came to that conclusion, but let me clear the air. We bought this house fair and square because we could afford it. If it hadn't been within our budget, we wouldn't have bought it. And for the record, Jim and Carrie are not broke. They have stable incomes. Acting like they need our charity is just insulting to them. Also, my husband and I are in a very similar financial situation to Jim and Carrie, so I don't understand why they'd need our help or why anyone would think they do. It's a bit odd, but since some of you brought it up, I wanted to clarify. Some people didn't like that I said I hope they reconcile and stay together, claiming Jim deserves better. Maybe he does, but ultimately it's his choice. I don't get why so many people feel the need to pour hate here, call me names, or call Jim a pushover without even knowing him. They love each other despite all their problems, and they're having a child together. That's a big deal. They can't just walk away from each other and move on, given the circumstances. So yes, I wanted and still want things to work out for them. That's all I wanted to say for now. Update 3. Hi everyone. It's been almost 3 weeks since my last post. I just wanted to share that Jim and Carrie have decided to reconcile and try to work things out. I'm really happy for them, even though Carrie and I still aren't talking. I found out from my husband that they've agreed to attend family therapy for a couple of months to see how things go. They'll still live separately for now, and when the baby arrives, they'll co-parent together for the first few months. If things go well, they plan to move back in together. I'm genuinely happy for them. I know this isn't what a lot of people wanted to hear. Many were hoping Jim would just leave her, but he's going to do what he thinks is right, and everyone else will have to respect that. My mum and unemployed sister are trying to take 80% of my father's inheritance. They nearly ruined his business's reputation and now accuse me of embezzlement. I'm 32, and this has been one of the hardest weeks of my life. My dad suddenly passed away from a heart attack, and on top of grieving, I'm forced to deal with ugly family drama. Never in a million years did I think I'd face something like this at my age, but here we are. My parents divorced when I was 15, and it was brutal. My mum cheated on my dad with his best friend, which tore our family apart. My younger sister, Emmy, she's 28 now, sided with mum. I chose to live with dad, and things were never the same between us again. Dad was a self-made businessman. He started with a tiny electronics repair shop in our garage when I was a kid. I still remember spending weekends helping him sort parts and study circuit diagrams. Over the years, he grew that little shop into a chain of stores across the state. His story always inspired me. He worked relentlessly and achieved everything through grit and perseverance. After the divorce, he buried himself even more in work. I think it was his way of coping with the betrayal. Many nights I'd wake up and find him hunched over spreadsheets at planning new strategies. Despite the long hours, he always made time for me. We had breakfast together every morning, and he never missed a single school event. Eventually, he remarried a wonderful woman named Susan. She never tried to replace my mum, but she was kind, supportive, and a true partner for my dad. They traveled, volunteered, and seemed genuinely happy together. It made me feel good to see him smiling again. Meanwhile, Mum's life went downhill. Her fling with Dad's ex-best friend didn't last, and since then she's been struggling financially. She always claimed Dad cheated her in the divorce, but from what I know, the settlement was fair. He even let her keep the family home, which she later had to sell because of her own poor money management. Over the years, she bounced from one job to another: real estate, retail, catering. Every time she started with enthusiasm but gave up as soon as things got difficult. Emmy followed the same path, dropped out of college, hopped from job to job, talked about big dreams but never saw them through. She leaned on Mum financially and emotionally, and together they lived in this strange bubble of resentment against my dad. Yesterday we held Dad's funeral. It was heartbreaking, but also overwhelming to see how many people came to pay their respects. The church was packed with colleagues, employees, and people from the community who admired him. I gave the eulogy, sharing stories about his kindness, work ethic, and the lessons he taught me about honesty, resilience, and helping others. Speaking through the tears was hard, but I wanted to honor him properly. What stunned me was that Mum and Emmy showed up. They hadn't spoken to Dad in years. They sat in the very back, whispering to each other. At first, I was glad they came, but later, I overheard them talking, and what I heard made me sick. Mum said, "Now's our chance to finally get what we deserve." Emmy nodded, saying they should fight for at least 80% of the inheritance. Their plan? Challenge the will, claim Dad wasn't of sound mind, and argue that Mum supported him for years while he built the business. I couldn't believe it. We were literally standing in the church at his funeral, and they were already plotting to grab his money. Dad always taught me to work for what you earn, and here they were, scheming to steal what wasn't theirs. It felt like betrayal, not just of me, but of everything he stood for. I wanted to confront them right then, but I held back. It was Dad's funeral, not the place for a scene. Instead, I kept quiet and decided to stay alert. In the days after, I noticed Mum and Emmy acting suspiciously sweet towards Susan, completely unlike them. They were trying to win her over, hoping she'd soften. I even caught Emmy snooping around Dad's office, pretending to look for family photos, but obviously searching for documents to use in court. Yesterday we finally sat down with Dad's lawyer for the reading of the will. Susan was quiet, still shaken from losing him. Mum and Emmy kept shifting in their seats, glancing at each other nervously. I tried to keep my face neutral, though inside I knew exactly what they were hoping for. As expected, Dad left the business to me since I'd worked alongside him for years and understood it best. Susan inherited the house and a large portion of his savings. He also made several charitable donations, true to his values. And Mum? Emmy? They weren't even mentioned. Mum and my sister only got symbolic amounts, $10,000 each. The moment the lawyer finished reading the will, my mother exploded. She started yelling about how unfair it was, how she had supported my father for years while he built his company, and how she deserved a bigger share. Conveniently, she left out the part where her affair destroyed their marriage. Emmy jumped in right after, claiming it wasn't right that I inherited so much since I had already benefited by living with Dad after the divorce. She accused him of favoritism, saying he punished her just because she sided with Mum back then. It was obvious they had rehearsed this whole performance. That's when I snapped. I told them I had overheard their little scheme at the funeral. I called them out for plotting to contest the will and trying to take advantage of the situation. I said they should be ashamed of themselves, thinking only about money while the rest of us were grieving. Mum tried to backpedal, saying I didn't understand how hard things were for her after the divorce. She painted herself as a victim, glossing over the fact that she squandered everything she got in the settlement. Emmy accused me of always taking Dad's side and never caring about them, but I stood my ground. I reminded them how they treated Dad all those years, cutting him off, rejecting his attempts at reconciliation. I pointed out that he didn't owe them anything. The fact that he left them even a token amount was proof of his generosity. The meeting ended with Mum and Emmy storming out, threatening to bring in lawyers. Susan broke down crying from the stress. The attorney reassured us that the will was solid and very hard to challenge, but he warned that if they did file a lawsuit, things could get ugly and drag on for a long time. Since then, my phone hasn't stopped buzzing. Relatives keep reaching out with their opinions. Some are on my side, saying Mum and Emmy are just being greedy and that Dad had every right to decide what happened with his estate. Others say I'm being too harsh and should try to see their perspective. A few even suggested I hand over part of my inheritance for the sake of peace in the family, but I refuse. Dad worked himself to the bone for everything he built. He alone had the right to decide how his estate would be divided. Mum forfeited any claim the day she cheated and walked away. Emmy chose her side back then, and she barely had any relationship. With Dad for years, I've spent the last several days digging into Dad's business records, determined to be ready in case they take this to court. From everything I can see, Mum's claims of supporting him while he built the company are exaggerated. The truth is, the business only really took off after the divorce, when Dad threw himself completely into work. I also spoke with longtime employees who had been with him from the early days. They shared stories of his dedication working nights, weekends, never slowing down. One of them, Jim, told me how Dad gave him a chance when no one else would. Jim had a criminal record from his youth and couldn't find a job anywhere, but Dad hired him as a janitor and later helped him rise all the way to store manager. There are dozens of stories like that. Dad didn't just build a company, he built opportunities for people. Hearing those stories has only strengthened my resolve to defend his legacy. He wasn't building this business for greed. He wanted to create something lasting, something that supported entire families. I can't let my mother and sister's selfishness put that at risk, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't conflicted. A part of me wonders if I'm being too rigid. Should I try to compromise just to keep the peace? I don't want to go against Dad's final wishes, but the idea of a drawn-out legal battle makes me sick. It would drain money, energy, and cause even more family drama. Right now, I'm focusing on supporting Susan and keeping the company steady. Losing Dad was already devastating, and on top of that, fighting off my mum and sister's greed is exhausting. I barely sleep, constantly replaying that confrontation in my head. Part of me feels guilty for creating a scene so soon after his death, but another part of me is furious they would stoop so low. I worry most about Susan. Since the will was read, she's been almost silent, crushed by the stress. She adored my father, and watching his memory drag through mud is breaking her. The company has also been shaken. Dad was its heart and soul, and stepping into his shoes feels overwhelming. The last thing I need is a lawsuit distracting me from keeping everything afloat. I've even considered offering Mum and Emmy more money than what Dad left them, just to make them go away. But I know the risk that giving in might only encourage them to demand more. And most importantly, it would betray Dad's wishes. Last night, I found an old family photo album in Dad's office. One picture stopped me cold, the day of the first store's opening. Dad stood there cutting the ribbon, Mum smiling beside him, and Emmy and I clapping as little kids. We looked so happy, so proud. And I wondered, how did we end up here? How did that family turn into this? So here's my dilemma. Am I wrong for confronting my mum and sister so harshly, for standing my ground on honoring Dad's will? Should I fight this battle to the end, or try to compromise for the sake of family peace? I honestly don't know. If Mum and Emmy truly had zero chance of winning in court, part of me thought about just offering them a little more money to make them go away. Not a stake in the company, never. But if Dad left them each $10,000, maybe I'd offer 20-30K just to avoid endless headaches and move on with my life. Because in the end, nerves cost more than money. But if there was any chance they could actually succeed, maybe it would take a bigger offer to settle. Still, I understood what many people, and honestly what I myself wanted deep down, felt, that Mum and Emmy deserved nothing. If the case went to trial and they lost, they'd not only walk away empty-handed, but also have to cover court costs. That would have been its own kind of justice karma, really. Still, my own instincts told me to at least consider offering something small just to avoid a dragged-out war. Update 1: it's been about a month since my last post. Unfortunately, I don't have good news. Things with Mum and Emmy spiraled way beyond anything I could have imagined. At this point, it feels like I'm living inside some ridiculous soap opera. Except it's my actual life, and there's no dramatic background music to warn me before everything collapses. First, I want to thank everyone who commented on my first post. Your advice and support were a lifeline. To those who told me to stand firm, thank you. Your words helped me stay grounded. And to those who suggested compromise, I truly appreciate that perspective too. I even tried, but more on that later. So, where do I start? I guess with the lawsuit. Yep, Mum and Emmy officially hired an attorney to contest Dad's will. About a week after the reading, I was served court papers. Their lawyer has a reputation for being ruthless in inheritance battles. The lawsuit claims that Dad was not of sound mind when he wrote his will, and that Mum supposedly contributed significantly to building the business during the marriage, so much so that she's entitled to most of it. They're demanding 80% of the estate. Exactly what I overheard them plotting at the funeral. It's absurd. But absurd or not, it's already causing real damage. Legal fees are piling up fast. I had to hire my own lawyer. Thankfully, Tom, Dad's longtime friend and legal advisor, agreed to represent us. He knows the history of both our family and the company, which is a huge help. Even with his discounted rates though, this isn't cheap. Tom is confident the will is airtight, and that Mum and Emmy don't have a case. But he also warned me these disputes can drag on for months, sometimes years, and the lawsuit isn't even the worst part. Mum and Emmy launched a smear campaign against me and Susan. They're spreading disgusting rumors telling people Susan manipulated Dad into rewriting the will, that I've been embezzling money from the company for years, and that we plan to sell the business and fire everyone. Total lies. But rumors travel fast. I've spent countless hours on the phone reassuring employees that their jobs are safe. Even some of our long-time customers started asking if they should take their business elsewhere. Last week, I overheard 2 new hires whispering in the break room, wondering if they should start job hunting in case mass layoffs happen. I had to call an emergency staff meeting to squash the gossip. It kills me that it's come to this, that I have to defend both myself and my father's memory to people who worked beside him for decades. The accusation of theft especially infuriates me. Dad was meticulous about the company's finances, and he drilled that same discipline into me. The thought that I would steal from the very business he poured his life into makes my blood boil. I spent the past week going through financial records with our accountant, preparing evidence in case the claim makes it into court. Susan is struggling more than anyone. She isn't used to this level of scheming and backstabbing. At one point, she even said maybe we should give Mum and Emmy what they want just to make it stop. I had to remind her again and again that giving in is exactly what they want. The other night, I found her crying in Dad's office, clutching one of his old sweaters, the one he always wore when he worked late. Through her tears, she looked at me and asked, would he really want all this fighting? My heart broke. I tried reaching out directly to Mum and Emmy, phone calls, texts hoping to reason with them. They ignored everything. Now all communication goes through their lawyer. It feels like they've forgotten we're even family. I did run into Emmy at the store last week. I thought maybe without Mum around I could get through to her. But the second she saw me, her face went cold. She accused me of turning the family against her and stealing Dad's money. I tried to remind her how they treated him after the divorce, but she just smirked and said, "You were always Dad's golden boy." Then she walked away. It was like talking to a stranger, not the sister I grew up with. Meanwhile, the rest of the family is splitting apart. Some of my aunts and uncles are furious at Mum and Emmy and fully on my side. Others think I'm being too harsh and should just give them more money for the sake of peace. My cousin Jack even yelled at me during a family dinner, saying my stubbornness is what's tearing us apart. I left early just to avoid making a scene. That dinner was supposed to be a chance for us all to come together, remember Dad, and support each other. Instead, it turned into a battlefield. My Aunt Sarah Mum's sister even threw little digs about how some people forget where they come from once they get a little money. This is my life now. A nightmare I can't wake up from. Update. #2 that dinner with the family ended in total chaos. My uncle Pietar, Dad's brother, fired back at my cousin Jack, saying some people never learn to value hard work. Jack started shouting, and from there everything just unraveled. Meanwhile, I've been throwing myself into the business, trying to keep it afloat no matter what. Dad built this company from the ground up, and I'll be damned if I let it fall apart on my watch. Thankfully, most of the employees have been amazing. Many of them have known me since I was a kid, and they keep sharing stories about Dad that helped me push through. One moment that hit me especially hard, Jim the guy dad once gave a second chance to I mentioned him before came into my office the other day carrying a stack of old photographs. They were from years of company events, picnics, Christmas parties, store openings. And in every single picture, there was Dad, sleeves rolled up, working right alongside everyone else. Jim looked at me and said, "This is who your father was. This is what you're fighting for." I can't even put into words how much that meant, but the toll is real. I barely sleep. I've lost weight. Friends keep telling me I look awful. My schedule is nothing but lawyers, paperwork, and damage. Control. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror and hardly recognize the exhausted, hollow-eyed man staring back. For a split second, I wonder if it's worth it. The worst part is the doubt. I keep asking myself, am I making the right choice? Would it be easier to just pay them off so this nightmare ends? But then I remember the look on Dad's face when he told me he was leaving the business to me. I can't betray that trust. I won't. Tom, our lawyer, reminds me constantly, this is a marathon, not a sprint. He says lawsuits like this can drag on for years. So I've started documenting every nasty rumor, every ignored call, every attempt I've made to reach out. We're also gathering testimony from longtime employees about Dad's work ethic and how the business grew after the divorce. To counter Mum's ridiculous claims that she helped build it. At the same time, I've realized I need to fight not just in court but also in the court of public opinion. I'm planning a company-wide meeting to directly address the rumors and reassure everyone that their jobs are safe. I also intend to personally call some of our biggest clients to maintain their trust. Susan and I are even working on starting a scholarship fund in Dad's name for local kids who want to study business or electronics. We figured it's not only a way to honor his memory, but also to show the community that, like him, we believe in giving back. The response so far has been incredible. Even my old high school principal suggested we award the first scholarship at this year's graduation ceremony. It's a small light in a very dark time. As for Mum and Emmy, I've stopped trying to reason with them. If they want to communicate, it'll be through lawyers. It hurts to imagine what Dad would think, seeing his family torn apart like this. I wish I could tell you they came to their senses, that we patched things up and became one big happy family again. But that's not reality. The truth is messy, painful, and full of disappointment for those who told me in my first post to seek compromise. I want you to know I really did try. I offered them a trust fund larger than the $10,000 Dad had originally left, but nowhere near the insane 80% they demanded. They flat out rejected it. Their counteroffer, if you can even call it, that was that they dropped the lawsuit. If I gave them 70% of the inheritance and walked away from the company entirely. When Tom told me that, I almost laughed. It's so detached from reality, it made me wonder if we even live in the same world anymore. So here I am, preparing for a long, ugly legal war with my own mother and sister. Definitely not what I expected when we buried Dad just months ago. But this is the path, and I'm walking it. What weighs on me the most is knowing that no matter how this ends, our family will never be the same. Even if by some miracle Mum and Emmy dropped everything tomorrow, too much has been said. Too many lines have been crossed. Trust is gone. Love. I don't even know if it was ever there from their side, but I'm not fighting alone. Susan has been my rock through all of this. She misses Dad, she hates the rumors, she feels the weight of the lawsuit, but she's still here, reminding me what we're fighting for whenever I start to doubt. And beyond her, I've got Dad's old friends, employees who feel more like family than blood ever did, and loyal clients reaching out to show support. Maybe that's what Dad was trying to teach me all along, that family isn't just blood. Family is the people who stand beside you, share your values, and help you be the best version of yourself. I'll write another update when I have news. In the meantime, if anyone has advice on surviving baseless lawsuits or pushing back against smear campaigns, I'm all ears. And thank you again truly for all the support. It means more than you know. Hopefully, the next update will bring better news. Final update, what a year it's been. I kept putting off writing this last update partly because life stayed hectic, but mostly because I wanted to be absolutely sure everything was over before sharing it with you. Now it is, and I promised to keep you in the loop. So here we go. Let's start with the lawsuit. After months of legal battles and mountains of paperwork, we finally had our day in court. It was exhausting beyond words. Mum and Emmy's lawyer pulled out every trick he had, painting Mum as the long-suffering wife who sacrificed everything for Dad's business only to be cruelly cast aside. He even brought in so-called experts to testify about the emotional labor of a spouse being the foundation of a company's success. Theatrics were off the charts. He had Mum take the stand, telling stories about lonely nights while Dad was at the office conveniently leaving out her affair with his best friend. But Tom, our lawyer, was ready. He presented proof of Dad's endless hours of work, employee testimonies about how the company really grew after the divorce, and financial records showing Mum had already received a fair settlement back then. He also didn't let her gloss over the affair. One of the most powerful moments came from Jim, the same employee Dad gave a second chance to. He told the court how Dad believed in him when no one else would, and how he watched firsthand as Dad's determination built the business. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room except for Mum and Emmy, who sat stone-faced, like they'd swallowed something bitter, but the knockout blow came from something completely unexpected. Remember how Emmy had snooped around Dad's office after the funeral? Turns out she did find something Dad's old journal from the divorce years. They thought it would strengthen their case, maybe show Dad's state of mind. Instead, it destroyed them. When Tom got it during discovery, it told a very different story. Pages about sleepless nights, juggling payroll, taking out a second mortgage on the house to keep the company alive. Notes about Mum's indifference to the business, her reckless spending, and yes, her affair. I'll never forget one entry Tom read aloud. Dad wrote about a night when everything was on the brink of collapse. He came home desperate to talk money, only to find Mum out partying, having spent hundreds on a new outfit. He described how alone he felt, how close he was to giving up. But then he wrote about quietly checking on me while I slept. And that moment gave him the strength to keep going. For my son, he wrote, I will build a legacy he can be proud of. Hearing those words in court nearly broke me. But they also reminded me why I was fighting. After that, things moved quickly. The judge ruled in our favor, threw out their case, and ordered Mum and Emmy to cover our legal fees. On paper, it was a total victory. But it didn't feel like joy, just relief, and a heavy sadness that it ever came to this, and that wasn't the end. Remember the smear campaign they'd been running? It backfired. Some of the nastier rumors, like embezzlement and claims that we planned to sell the company, were legally deemed defamatory. We didn't sue, but the threat alone forced them to issue a public retraction. Watching them admit they'd spread lies was surreal. They looked small, defeated, nothing like the bold, angry women who started all of this. Part of me pitted them, but mostly I was angry for everything they'd put us through. The fallout was massive. Relatives who once doubted me or even sided with them turned away once the truth came out. The business, though shaken at first by the negativity, ultimately grew stronger. Employees and clients saw our transparency, our willingness to stand and fight, and it built trust instead of eroding it. We held a company-wide meeting afterward, where I laid everything out honestly and shared our plans moving forward. I was nervous people had lost faith, but when I looked around, all I saw were supportive faces, and the scholarship fund we set up in Dad's name, it's already changed lives. We've helped a dozen local kids chase their college dreams. At the first ceremony, handing out those scholarships and telling Dad's story about his belief in hard work and giving back felt like the perfect way to honor him. On a personal level, this whole ordeal has changed me. I've learned how quickly people can turn against you, but I've also learned who truly stands by your side. I found family in Susan, in our loyal employees, in the friends who never wavered even in all of you, who listened, advised, and sent words of encouragement when I needed them most. As for Mum and Emmy, I haven't spoken to them since the verdict. Maybe I never will. That's a wound time alone won't fix. So here it is, the final chapter. Thank you for following me through this storm. Your support meant more than I can ever say. It's time to close this book and focus on building the future Dad dreamed about. This will be my last update. My wife and her best friend accused me of cheating and lost their minds when they found out I wasn't. I'm 31. My wife is 29. Last year, we had a baby. The birth was traumatic, and my wife developed postpartum depression. Originally, she planned to return to work after giving birth, but the challenges were so intense that we decided to wait until our daughter turned 1 and then reassess the situation. She attends weekly appointments with a psychiatrist. Since my wife stayed home full-time, I had to work more. We discussed this in advance before making the decision. A few weeks ago, my boss offered me a project that required a lot of overtime. It was a fantastic opportunity to earn extra money and advance my career. I talked it over with my wife, and she agreed that I should take it. For 4 weeks while I worked on the project, my mother-in-law and my wife's best friend, Jessie, helped with some of the responsibilities I usually handled. Jessie is a stay-at-home mum with a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. She started coming over during the day to watch the kids alongside my wife. 3 weeks into the project, it became clear we'd need a few more weeks to finish. That evening, I came home and spoke to my wife about it. She said it was fine. Over the next few days, however, she became very cold. I didn't think much of it, as her mood swings over the past few months weren't unusual, and I tried not to take it personally. During the last week of the project, I came home one evening and saw Jessie still at our house. I greeted her and my wife then went to check on our daughter. Before I reached her room, I overheard Jessie say something like, "He doesn't even stop to say hi to you, that's definitely a sign." I turned around and asked what she meant. My wife immediately started crying while Jessie accused me of cheating. Jessie said I must hate my wife because of her postpartum depression and that she wasn't attractive to me anymore since gaining weight after pregnancy. None of this was true. I've been doing my best to support my wife through her depression and take care of our family, and I think she looks beautiful as she is. She simply wasn't in the mood for intimacy, and I didn't pressure her. Then Jessie demanded to see my phone. I said no. She claimed that was proof I was guilty. I told my wife she could check my phone if she wanted. She nodded. Something inside me broke. It hurt that she believed I was having an affair and that she didn't trust me after everything we'd been through. She looked through my phone. There was nothing incriminating. Jessie then accused me of deleting evidence and started shouting, waking our daughter. I told her to leave the house. Eventually, she left and I went to calm our daughter while my wife sat on the couch crying. Once our daughter was asleep again, I sat next to my wife and tried talking to her. She admitted she'd been worried ever since I started working overtime. I reminded her we had discussed the project beforehand and she had agreed I should take it. She said it was suspicious that the project timeline had been extended. I explained that sometimes these things happen and showed her messages, emails, and payroll records proving the overtime. She apologized for doubting me and said she trusted me again. It was just that Jessie kept telling her these things were signs. I asked my wife why she trusted Jessie more than me and why she didn't come to me first with her concerns. She had no answer. A couple of weeks later, the project ended. I've reduced my workload a bit to spend more time with my wife and daughter, but I feel completely drained trying to accommodate her and anxious, because deep down I know she doesn't fully trust me. I wonder what will happen next time I take on a project or have a work assignment, or if I go on a business trip. Will this cycle of accusations happen again? I've tried bringing it up a few times, but my wife says it's not the right time. She's tired and sad. I try to respect her feelings, but I can't help wondering if there's room for my feelings in our family anymore. I don't know what to do in this situation. Does anyone have advice on how to move forward? Update: 4 days later that evening, I approached my wife and told her I wanted to find a therapist. I didn't connect it to her accusations or anything specific, I just said I was struggling. She shrugged. She said, "Do whatever you want." The next day, I returned from work to find our bedroom in my home office completely ransacked. Papers and personal items were scattered everywhere. My wife was nowhere to be found, and our daughter was crying in her room. She had left her alone and turned off her phone. I immediately tried calling her parents and a few friends, but no one had seen her. Growing more anxious, I called my mum to see if she could watch our daughter while I searched. Before my mum could arrive, my wife came back, driving the car. Jessie, her friend, stayed in the car and hadn't entered the house since I had kicked her out because she was insulted by my behavior. My wife walked in, visibly upset and in tears. I asked what had happened, initially fearing that someone had broken in. Instead, she started yelling at me, accusing me of cheating and claiming that my visits to a psychiatrist were a cover to see a mistress. I tried to calm her and insisted that none of it was true, but she attacked me and broke my nose. After realizing what she had done, she slumped onto the couch in a dazed state, staring blankly at the wall. I quickly went to my daughter's room and locked the door. I called my mum, who was already on her way, to explain the situation, and also reached out to my mother-in-law to ask her to come and look after my wife. I packed a bag for our daughter, and my mum and I left with her. My wife didn't even look up. We dropped our daughter off at my father's house and then went to the emergency room to treat my nose. In the process, I stained my mum's new Subaru with blood. For now, my daughter and I are staying with my parents, while my wife is with her parents. I am considering filing for a restraining order against Jessie. My wife and I are separating. I still love her, but I cannot live with someone who causes me harm and could potentially endanger our child. I am holding off on divorce, hoping she will receive the necessary treatment so we might repair our relationship. My in-laws mentioned that they are considering inpatient care at a local facility. I have also documented the entire chaotic incident in case it becomes relevant for custody proceedings. My heart aches because I know this isn't really my wife, it's her mental illness, but I have to protect myself, our daughter, and give my wife space to recover. I hope this is the right decision. Ultimately, I concluded that to safeguard my daughter, I must file a police report. I was heading to the station when, 3 days later, my wife died early Monday morning. She had become convinced by her friend Jessie that I was having an affair, which was entirely false. She lost her sanity. She was with her parents, who had planned to admit her to a hospital for treatment. On Sunday evening, she had come to my parents' house, demanding to take our daughter. She had left her alone for a few hours previously and had attacked me. I refused. I offered her supervised time with the child in the presence of both sets of parents, but she refused, upset, and eventually left. A few hours later, she crashed her parents' car into a tree and died. Jessie visited yesterday, crying to see me and our daughter. She claimed she planned to speak at my wife's funeral and that she had arranged it with my in-laws, but informed me out of courtesy. I told her she would not be allowed to speak. We argued and she left, saying that I wasn't the only person who loved my wife. I spoke with my in-laws, who insist that Jessie should be allowed to speak because she had known my wife since childhood, and they are close to her. I fear that giving in to their pressure could damage my relationship with them. At the same time, the thought of Jessie standing at my wife's funeral makes me physically sick. I don't think I could bear hearing her, knowing she had taken pleasure in my wife's mental decline and had left our daughter alone, yet I don't trust my own judgment right now. My mind is clouded, my parents are divided over what to do, and I don't have the energy to reach out to friends. So once again, I am asking, what should I do? I'm refusing to go on a family vacation because my sister insists that I babysit her kids. I had to move out of my parents' house since I was constantly roped into watching my 3 nieces and nephews. Despite this, last year I often ended up acting as the assistant or even the main nanny on family trips. For instance, last summer we went on a beach vacation with my parents, who paid for my hotel room, but I had to share it with 3 noisy boys because my sister and her husband wanted a separate room for themselves. I was promised free time to do my own things, but instead I was forced to spend all my free time looking after the kids. I complained, but everyone reminded me that I was there for free. In the end, we only did one activity I actually wanted to: visit an art gallery. I enjoy visiting galleries while on vacation, but the kids found it boring. This year, my parents planned a similar beach trip in June, expecting me to go under the same conditions as last year. I refused. I said I would drive myself and pay for a separate hotel room so I could have my own space. My parents were shocked and reminded me of the cost, but I told them it wasn't an issue. I have a good job and a decent car, so I can afford it. Then came all the arguments, but I explained all the reasons why I was going alone and paying for myself. I want to enjoy the vacation as an adult, not as a child. My parents told my sister, who immediately called me, yelling that I would ruin the whole trip if I did my own thing while she dealt with 3 kids. I finally yelled back that last year she dragged me into her chaos, leaving me barely able to do anything I wanted, and made me feel guilty when I simply wanted to visit an art gallery. I'm an adult and deserve a vacation too. Now my sister isn't speaking to me, and my parents are still trying to convince me to go with them to keep the peace. I continue to refuse, but the pressure is mounting. I know it might be tough for them without someone to help, but I don't see myself as selfish for standing my ground. Let me know what you think in the comments. Who is in the right here, me or my sister, who has 3 children to care for? Raising 3 kids isn't easy. Update 1, about an hour after I posted, my sister somehow saw it. She's not just furious with me, she's upset that no one in the comments supported her. In short, she threw a tantrum, saying how hard it is to be a parent of triplets and that I, as a young and free adult, should help her. I stuck to my position and now wait for a call from my parents, whom she has already contacted. Update 2. I finished work, so I can give more details. Everything seems to have been resolved. My parents read my post and were shocked by the flood of comments. Yes, they are angry at me for posting, but I told them that if they had listened to me from the start, I wouldn't have had to. I was fed up with the peacekeeping politics that expected me to sacrifice myself for the family. In the end, my parents confronted my sister. The trip was cancelled anyway, as the hotel wasn't booked yet, but now my parents argue with my sister. She blames me, and the kids are sad because they won't be going to the beach. She even called me during lunch, implying I have no life of my own, so I should help her. I recorded the conversation and showed it to my parents. A few days later, they said they would never force me to babysit again and admitted that what happened last year was unfair to me. Now they're furious with my sister for claiming I should help because I have no life. She's playing the victim, while her husband essentially said no to the chaos and now spends most of his time at work. Update 3, my parents have apologized, but my sister hasn't. At least a week ago when I asked, the answer was no. My post essentially opened Pandora's box in our family. Here's the full backstory. My parents and older sister got used to me helping with her triplets. I didn't move out of my parents' house until I was 22 because I wanted to save money. While in college, the scholarship provided significant support and living at home helped me manage. I'm very grateful for that. However, after college, everyone seemed to think I had all the free time in the world, and my parents convinced me to go on this family vacation with them. I was forced to babysit my 3 6-year-old nephews. And on top of that, I had to share a hotel room with them. Believe me, they didn't listen to a single word I said. On the very first night, I had to call their mother twice before they finally obeyed. And yet, when I wanted to do something else during the trip, suddenly I was the bad guy. If my plans didn't suit the rest of the family, they simply didn't happen. It was extremely hypocritical. Being part of the family didn't give me a voice in decisions. You can be sure that I laid out all these complaints to my parents after my previous post, and they admitted they were wrong. After that red-hot vacation, I decided it was time to move out and did so by the end of the summer, surprising everyone since I didn't tell anyone beforehand. I had landed a great job right after college thanks to an internship, and moving out also cut my commute from 45 minutes to just 15. My sister was particularly unhappy because this meant her free childcare on weekends was over, but she still tried to pressure me into babysitting. Sometimes I gave in when bribed with pizza, and that became a kind of norm. Last month, my parents announced plans for another family vacation to the same coastal spot, essentially expecting the same arrangement as last year. I immediately recognized it as a trap. I knew that if I went with them and let them pay for the hotel, I'd end up in the same situation as before. So I calmly told them I would drive myself and pay for my own accommodation. That's when the storm began. When my parents realized they couldn't rope me in again, they resorted to pleading, and my sister tried to practically order me to go along, using manipulation and emotional pressure, but it didn't work. Then, I posted about it online. Initially, the whole family was against me. My sister called my parents, who then called me while I still had a little time in the morning to talk. They were on the phone with me while reading my post. I asked if anything in the post was untrue. They tried to dodge the answer, claiming the story was exaggerated, but I pointed out multiple details that proved otherwise. The story was accurate. I told them to check the comments, though there were too many to read them all. I kept refreshing the page on my computer and telling them how many comments had already been posted. I then explained that I was fed up with always having to be the peacekeeper, sacrificing my time to satisfy my sister, essentially being treated as a victim. I said I had no more time and we would have to continue the conversation later. My parents were stunned. Within hours. Hundreds, if not thousands, of people had left comments. Later, I told them the number of comments had almost doubled and continued to grow, which only amplified their shock. It seemed they had to seriously reflect on their actions. My sister also tried calling me while I was at work, but my phone was on silent until lunchtime, so she could only leave messages. She was persistent though, and finally reached me during lunch. The gist of the conversation was that my post had pushed our parents to my side, and now they were angry at her. As a result of the argument between them, my parents cancelled the entire trip. Later, they admitted that initially they had tried to shift all the blame for cancelling the vacation onto me because they were embarrassed, but ultimately they fully acknowledged their mistakes. They told me no excuse could justify making me the free babysitter when I no longer even lived at home. They tried to point out that they never charged me for housing while I was in college, but I reminded them that children don't ask to be born, and I had been doing my best to move forward. I also reminded them that my father had similar privileges when he was in college living at home for free, and those points basically overruled any arguments my parents made. When my sister finally reached me during lunch, I laid out the facts. She revealed her true nature, implying that I had no life and that I should spend my weekends helping her because she was too tired to leave the house without the kids. She's a stay-at-home mum. Her husband earns well, and they live in a nice house they own. Honestly, my nephews aren't my responsibility. They were simply dumped on me, and people expected it to continue indefinitely. My sister got angry and hung up, but I recorded the conversation and later played it for my parents. They were furious and went to war with her. She dug in her heels, accused me again, and insisted my life should revolve around hers. I told her that was the most selfish and narcissistic thing I had ever heard. A few days later, her husband finally intervened and forced her to apologize to me. I've never seen anyone break her will like that. She almost cried. It turned out that one reason I had been their default babysitter was that my sister didn't trust anyone else with the kids. It was never really about money, or was it? Her husband thought my sister had been paying me for the time I spent with her kids after I moved out of my parents' house. But no, she didn't even cover gas, just gave me a little cash to order pizza for the kids and myself, and I could keep the change. It turned out that she had skipped some payments for several months. When this came up in her half-hearted apology, her husband blew up, and she had to pay me the full amount in cash from her own savings, which of course she wasn't happy about. After that, he apologized to me for his inaction that had allowed my sister to walk all over me, and promised that they would find a proper babysitter on the side. Yes, it would cost them a bit, but it meant my sister could finally go on dates with her husband again. A family meeting happened a few days later at my parents' house. Everyone apologized to me once more. After that, my parents reconfirmed the family vacation. And yes, I still plan to drive myself and pay for my hotel room. If my sister tries again to dump childcare responsibilities on me, I'll stay at a different hotel. I told her this, and she promised it wouldn't happen. So, if I don't post another update a month after the vacation, that means everything. Went smoothly. Update 4, my sister called, demanding that I delete my posts. She was even more upset after realizing how far this story had spread. She called me after work, asking if the comments were still coming in. She said she couldn't handle all the negativity because so many of them were critical of her. I was honest, at least 10 new comments arrived daily, most of them portraying her in a negative light. She started crying and insisted I remove my posts, but I refused. I told her she could complain to anyone she wanted, but the posts would stay because they guarantee she can no longer treat me like crap. After all, she literally acted as if my life should revolve around hers. She didn't pay me for babysitting as she was supposed to, kept the money for herself, and forced me to be the permanent nanny during last year's family vacation. No wonder people hate her for taking advantage of me. When I mentioned I had even made a video about the posts, she screamed and hung up. Later, my parents called, begging me to delete the posts. I refused, explaining I only posted because they had failed to stand up for me. None of this would have happened if they had told my sister she had to treat me as an equal, not a servant. I'm not her butler, nanny, or handyman, I'm her brother. And a grown man. Eventually, they agreed but still begged me to remove the posts. I told them I would continue posting unless they started defending me more often when my sister whines. Let her deal with her own problems. Her entitlement led to this mess in the first place. I'm not the father of her kids. I have my own life, a career I've just started, and hopefully soon a girlfriend, someone I actually want to date. I'm moving forward and won't let anyone stop me. They can either step aside or keep indulging my sister, but I told them the latter will backfire. The only way to stop new posts is to end this whole circus. My story is completely anonymous, and I have the right to express my justified grievances. In the end, my mother cried, my father stayed silent, and I said their tears wouldn't move me. They know what needs to happen. Stop supporting my sister. Then my sister called again to yell because my parents told her they would no longer intervene and that she had to handle things herself. They also told her to be kinder to me. I just imagined her screaming in her head at the idea of being kinder to her younger brother. I responded sarcastically. When I finally hung up, she cried. My sister's husband later called to hear my side. He was angry that I continued posting, making his wife cry. I explained everything, and he said he would talk to her again. I hope this chaos ends here. The family vacation is still scheduled for the end of June. I've already booked my room and taken the day off so we can leave on Friday. My room is not near my parents, my sister's, her husband's or the nephew's rooms. It's on a completely different floor. When we go to the coast, if it's not a family event, I'll do whatever I want. You can be sure I'll finally visit those art galleries, try local food, and truly enjoy the vacation. The trip, as expected, was full of ups and downs. The good news is my parents no longer fall for my sister's attempts to make me her nanny. Yes, she tried. The bad news is that my sister attempted to find out which room I was staying in but failed, ending up in another ridiculous situation with her husband. First, I had informed the hotel in advance that no one should be given any information about me except the police. The staff assured me over the phone that no one would be told. On the day of the trip, I left earlier than everyone else. I knew they wouldn't be ready before M, so I left at 9 o'clock. Check-in wasn't until 1 o'clock p.m., but I wanted some buffer time. I sent a message in our family group chat and began the 3-hour drive. My parents were upset because they had planned a family breakfast along the way, but I told them I hadn't been informed, so breakfast was cancelled in favor of fast food. Just as I had planned, I arrived at the hotel too early for check-in, but told the staff I was there to make sure my parents or sister couldn't obtain my information. They confirmed that they didn't give out such details, but I warned them I knew of cases where it had happened anyway. I wanted to make sure that if my mum, sister, and 3 crying kids came asking, the staff would resist. Reluctantly, they promised that only I could access my room. I then went to eat, returned an hour later, and saw my parents' cars and my brother-in-law's huge SUV outside. I approached the front desk after making sure no one was in the lobby. Everything was calm. I asked the staff if my family had inquired about my room. They had, but the employee refused to give any information. My sister tried to pressure them, but her husband shut her down. I checked in, went to my room, and called my parents, not mentioning that I knew about their attempts to track me. They didn't say anything either. Later, we all met and went on a tour. At one point, my sister asked me to watch her kids. I flat out refused because I knew her game. She'd claim it was for a few minutes, then disappear for an hour. I caught her, and her husband told her to stop trying to force me into babysitting. She immediately started crying, claiming she needed a break. Her husband told her he was tired too, but didn't complain. My mum shot me a nasty look, so I went to her and said that if she even thought I was supposed to watch the kids, I would leave the family vacation immediately. This isn't my job, and I was tired of her and my sister acting as if it was my duty. This made my mum cry, repeating "you're right" over and over, a classic trick of hers to appear pitiful and guilt me, but I just said yes, I was right, and told her to leave it and calm down. After that, neither my mum nor sister tried anything like that again. When we returned to the hotel after dinner, my family crowded near the elevator, but I didn't go with them. They asked why, and I said I'd wait for the next elevator. My sister looked at me with hatred, realizing why I was doing this. I simply sat in the lobby, scrolling through social media for about 15 minutes, then took the elevator to my floor. My room was on a different floor, at the far end of the hotel. The night was wonderful. The next morning, we all went to breakfast, but I deliberately waited until they left first. I was the last one out of my room and also the last to return in the evening. Breakfast went fine, and I sent a message in the group chat saying I would spend the day on my own activities. My mum suggested visiting the aquarium and a few other places. I agreed to meet them at the aquarium, but the rest of the day would be mine. They agreed, and the day passed without incident. That evening, as I returned to my room, my sister caught me leaving. She had probably been searching the entire floor for me. I went back to rest before dinner because I was exhausted from walking. When I left again to meet them for dinner, she tried to corner me, claiming I had ruined her family vacation because now it was no different from her normal life. She still had to deal with the kids. I told her to stop talking nonsense. Our parents help her a lot, and I was tired of being her scapegoat. She needed to relax because the free babysitter days were over. She had to leave me alone and handle her own life. I walked on while she yelled, "Hey, I'm trying to talk to you." I said I didn't care and was going to dinner. She followed me to the elevator, and we rode down in silence. I didn't stay quiet. I told my parents and brother-in-law that my sister had been stalking me to find my room. She was scolded like a child for staging such a pathetic scene. I told her to stop complaining and grow up. The days when she could impose her will on me were over. Then I left. The next day, I sat in the lobby and then got into my car. At dinner, I arrived first. When everyone else arrived, my sister looked dejected, but no one mentioned what had happened yesterday, and that suited me perfectly. My sister avoided me the entire evening. This time, I didn't hide at all. I rode the elevator straight with them and told everyone clearly that, unless there was an emergency, no one should knock on my door. A do not disturb sign hung on my door for a reason. The last day of the vacation went wonderfully. Neither my sister nor my mum disturbed me. They had completely given up. Throughout the trip, I played with my nephews. I'm not a complete jerk. They just wanted to have fun. I even bought each of them little bags of crystals and polished stones as souvenirs. There were a few minor disagreements between my sister and her husband, but I ignored them. Overall, I would call this vacation a victory because finally my mother and sister understood that the old days, when they could use me however they wanted, were over and I have my own life. Update 6. My mum and sister saw my latest post. They seemed to have no idea when to stop. Hi mum. Hi sister. I warned them I would post again if necessary, and here I am. Briefly, my mum and sister read my post and went berserk. My sister had been monitoring my account, knowing I'd post something. She called me in tears, complaining that I had made her look like a bad mother. I replied, if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. She tried to argue with me, but couldn't point out a single significant falsehood. Naturally, she then called mum. My mum came to my house demanding I delete all posts. I said no, now I had material for another post. I eventually got her to leave in tears. Later, I spoke with my parents on the phone and told them straight their indulgence of my sister led to the toxic family dynamics we have now. I will never go back to how things were, so if they hope for that, I'll shatter it. They told my sister to stop blaming me and leave me alone because they couldn't handle my pushback anymore. Of course, she threw a typical nobody loves me tantrum. My brother-in-law had to bring her back to reality. He didn't call me, likely staying neutral, but this clearly wasn't helping their marriage or my relationship with him. I had to say, sorry man, your wife has gone too far. My parents now insist my sister see a therapist because she cannot handle being a mother and needs to outgrow her old habits. Hopefully, this will be my last post. Hey sis, if you don't stop thinking I should be your personal servant, babysitter, and watchman, and stop acting like the world is against you just because you can't control me anymore, we simply can't interact. Let's settle things, move forward, and you treat me like a normal person, that's it. Update 7. My parents and I had a long talk. They apologized, and we agreed I would keep a little distance until Thanksgiving. Last night, I also had a heart-to-heart with my brother-in-law over a beer. We talked like men and cleared the air. He told my sister she needed a therapist, or he'd separate from her. They are now looking for a professional. He admitted that although she treated me poorly at home, she is a loving and kind wife in their marriage. He also mentioned that she liked being the only child and has carried resentment due to our almost 10-year age gap, which had built up over time. She agreed she needs therapy and will start as soon as it's arranged. They also found a qualified babysitter for my nephews. My brother-in-law admitted he had been upset with me but stayed out of it when support was needed. We agreed it was just a very unpleasant situation that needed closure. Thanks to these posts, I now have a girlfriend. The girl I liked figured out it was me after reading them and had just been waiting for me to make a move. Today, we're going on our first date. Thank you all for the overwhelming support. This is truly the last update. My narcissistic sister tried to hurt me, but the family brushed it off as a joke. Now everyone has finally realized just how unhinged she is. A little background. I'm the second youngest of 5 kids. Among my older siblings, I have 2 brothers and 1 older sister, who we'll call X for this story. There's a 5-year age gap between me and X, so we never had the kind of sisterly bond people usually expect in childhood. I was always a burden to her, and any time it was my turn to pick a family movie or something else, she would get upset. The reason is that, since she was 9, she's had an obsessive need to control everything and everyone. I think you can Guess where this leads? I'm about to turn 19 and X turned 24 this year. Her boyfriend, let's call him Y, proposed to her during a family day at the beach in June. It was one of those proposals with large white letters made of rose petals, which he had prepared before our family arrived. My sister was over the moon and said yes. My parents, along with my older brothers and sisters, were thrilled. The youngest child in our family is only 4 years old, so I don't think he fully understood what was happening. And now, the drama begins. From the moment of the proposal, X completely transformed into a dictator bride at the insistence of my mum. She appointed me as a bridesmaid, which pulled me into this entire mess. Here are the demands my dear sister laid out. All bridesmaids must pay for their own dresses, a soft pink gown costing $300, plus shoes, hair, and makeup. Every bridesmaid must attend all PRE wedding events, including a spa baccalaureate party at $800 per person and a Toronto baccalaureate weekend with a 2-night stay at the Fairmont for $100. Guests must pay a $150 deposit to secure their spot at the wedding banquet. Otherwise, their place is forfeited. Gifts must be chosen from her registry. Any gift not on the list will be returned. Bridesmaids must go to a beauty salon every 6 weeks to ensure their hair and skin look perfect for photos at their own expense. Any tattoos must be covered. Dresses must cover the neck, ankles, and wrists. The bride wants to be the only one showing tattoos and a bright hairstyle. Hair must be natural or covered with a wig at our own cost. Dresses are only available up to size 10. Anyone who doesn't fit must lose weight. I wear a size 12, and my sister called me fat and even ordered me a keto diet book. No one, including vendors, is allowed to communicate directly with the bride or groom. Everything must go through the bridesmaids. She created an email account with the wedding name, which we all have access to, and we're not supposed to ask if something is okay, we just have to know. We must remind guests about deposits and track which gifts they're giving or how much cash they plan to contribute. Telling this story to others made me realize my family is completely crazy. I'm considering talking to a therapist at my university to see if I can move into a dorm. I called my aunt, who is also my godmother, while at work, and she thinks my mum is insane. She strongly recommends I talk to my parents, not just about the wedding, but also about their preferential treatment of my sister. She's ready to step in if things go wrong. Commenters advise that finances drive many people's lives. If my sister doesn't come back down to earth, it will prevent people like me from participating in her wedding. I've tried explaining this to her, but she won't listen. Her fiancé earns over $120,000 a year in IT, and she, an accountant, earns $100,000. They could easily pay for everything themselves. I told my mum and sister that I won't participate until someone covers all my expenses. My mum shouldn't pretend everything is fine when my sister is acting like a spoiled diva. That approach won't work. She's a very calm person, so they're actually a good match. He's the only one who can calm her down regarding the entrance fee for the wedding. My family insists this is normal for an Italian family, but I just found out it's not. I need to tell my mum I don't have that kind of money. About my sister, she could have just included me as a regular guest. She has 13 bridesmaids in total, 12 regular bridesmaids and 1 maid of honor. Why exactly 13? To match the number of the groom's brothers in his class. There were 13 of them, and he became close to them like brothers. I don't really know what it means, but it's important to him. I spoke with my sister. She said it's my duty as her sister to save money. My mum and dad are paying almost $100,000 for the wedding, so they can't give me $2,000 for my expenses. I'm starting university in the fall, which will cost $177,039. It turns out my parents had actually saved money specifically for us kids. My dad confirmed this with bank statements. They created accounts with $25,000 for each of us, my brothers, my sisters, and me. The rule was that once we turned 19 and went to university, we could use that money for whatever we wanted. These were our funds. I had just turned 19 and my dad was about to transfer my money to me when we had this conversation. This caused a small argument, but first, some background. I discovered right after my sister got engaged, she had spoken to my mum about always feeling like a neglected child. She had used this phrase before, so I really believe my mum felt guilty when she heard it. After a long conversation, my mum decided she could redirect part of the funds from all the children's accounts to pay for my sister's wedding. For context, my 2 older brothers are in the army, unmarried, and living on base. They never used their $25,000 because the Canadian military covers their education, housing, and more. So my mum had $50,000 at her disposal. Combine that with $25,000 from my sister and my $25,000, and that would make $100,000. My mum decided that since I was going to spend $177,000 on my studies, she could just take my $25,000 for the wedding. Later, my sister manipulated this situation because she is a master manipulator who knows how to pull the right strings. When I was born, my mum suffered severe postpartum depression and was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility for months, leaving my sister, 2 brothers, and me in my dad's care. My older brothers were 9 and 7 at the time, and I was just a few months old. My sister was around 5. Because my brothers were demanding, my dad had plenty to worry about. I was cared for by a nanny, which meant my sister received the least attention. At a time when it was very important, I think this contributed to the development of her negative traits. While the nanny helped with basic needs, food, hygiene, clothing, and some play, she couldn't replace my mum. When my mum returned, my sister felt a huge resentment not toward my mum, but toward me. She blamed me for my mum leaving, which led to her trying to suffocate me with a pillow. My mum stopped it in time, and the family turned the incident into a funny story. It was her way of coping. Throughout my childhood, my sister used manipulation to get what she wanted, so it's no surprise she tried the same with her wedding. Mum felt guilty and decided to give her daughter everything she wanted. When my sister grew up, it was no longer about toys or candy, but full entertainment trips. As a result, I became much closer to my dad than to my mum. My sister and I had normal relations when I was 12, but everything changed when mum became pregnant with my youngest sister. This was accidental, and I became her target. Update 2. Now that the background is complete, here's what actually happened. We finally talked. I told my parents how I felt, the financial burden this would place on me, how unfair it was, and so on. My dad blew up. He had no idea about the $100,000. I showed him a screenshot from the group chat. He was upset that mum had repeatedly said, "Your father and I agreed," when in reality they hadn't discussed anything like that. We sorted out the wedding issue. I won't have to attend. Then I was asked to leave the room so my parents could talk alone. They worked out the budget. After that, my dad asked why I hadn't felt comfortable discussing this with him earlier. I showed him this story I've been writing. Dad was furious. He immediately called my sister and told her she needed to come home as soon as possible because he needed to talk to her and wouldn't accept any excuses. She said she'd be there in 4 hours because she was with her fiancé and his parents. Dad insisted she fly home immediately, but she hung up and blocked him. Dad told me again to go to my room. I still don't know exactly what happened between them. Alone, but then my mum came in to talk with me. She shared details about her postpartum, depression, and other things I hadn't known before. We seemed to reconcile, and I asked my mum whether my sister would agree to see a therapist, since she was so convinced that the 4-month gap after my birth caused all these issues. Mum said she would try, but of course, she couldn't force her. I told her that if my sister refused therapy, I would stop communicating with her and possibly limit contact altogether. Dad reassured me that I would get my $25,000 and wouldn't have to attend the wedding if I didn't want to. Since my sister charges $150 from each guest, she could fund her extravagant wedding with the money she collected. Of course, this is partly a joke, but it seems that the future in-laws aren't planning to pay for the wedding either, so my parents would have to cover it fully if she wants her big ski resort wedding. Regarding the $150 entrance fee, my sister made it up. There is no such Italian tradition. We spoke with the groom's mother when she brought my sister over, and she was shocked. While there is a tradition of a money dance at some banquets, there is no mandatory $150 collection.so. My sister arrived 5 hours later. While the groom's mother was present, she was sweet as pie, but once she left, oh my God, the gates of hell opened. My sister demanded to know why Dad had interrupted their peaceful evening and insisted she be brought home immediately. Dad said he didn't care about their evening and told her to sit down. She refused, and they started arguing. Eventually, she sat after Dad began using various methods of persuasion, including financial pressure and threatening to tell the groom's mother about her true nature, which apparently her fiancé hadn't yet seen. I was asked to leave the room again. There were many angry shouts and manipulations from my sister, including threats to cut off communication or prevent our parents from seeing their future grandchildren. She tried to force my mum back to the original $100,000 plan, but mum and dad didn't give in. The argument continued until my dad shouted that mum was not her punching bag and she was not to blame for her postpartum depression. If my sister was angry because of that, then she should go to therapy. I was called back and we discussed all the issues, starting with the Kiddo Diet book. My sister tried to justify her actions by saying I was fat and lazy, but dad defended me. My sister started crying and mum asked him to be gentler, which he did. In the end, we discussed everything, and I finally felt like part of the family, not another punching bag. My sister eventually called a taxi and left, claiming she was being attacked. We decided to wait until Christmas, when my brothers would return to town, to discuss as a family what we need to move forward without arguing. Most likely, this will either be therapy or her being cut off from the family. Mum and dad are still sorting out the budget with the groom's relatives. My parents told them that for such a wedding to happen, everyone would have to contribute. The groom's relatives agreed that $100,000 for a wedding is insane. The last thing I heard is that my sister would get $15,000 for the wedding, which actually meant $5,000 because $10,000 was already spent on her dress. The remaining $10,000 would be saved for something more meaningful. The groom's relatives also agreed to contribute $15,000, $10,000 for the wedding, and $5,000 for the honeymoon.as for my studies. Tomorrow Dad and I are going to the bank. We're cancelling the loan I was forced to take and paying the penalty for cancelling it. The loan would have only started during my studies, so fortunately the penalty is very small. Dad paid the penalty because he agreed that I shouldn't have taken the loan. My parents agreed to cover my first year of tuition without deducting the $25,000 saved for me. The entire amount they planned for my education will be transferred to a special account. My relationship with Mum is still a bit tense, and my sister just outright hates me. She blamed me for everything and said I caused irreparable damage to her relationship with her fiancé and his family. Because of this, she forbade me from attending her wedding and completely cut me out of her life. Honestly, I don't care. I don't feel like I lost a sister. I feel like I finally got rid of a villain. I promised Mum and Dad that I would never treat my younger sister like that. I plan to be the example she deserves and to protect her, just like my brothers and Dad protected me. Some interesting comments I've seen. One thing seems overlooked: your sister tried to kill you. That's serious. I hope you discuss this with a therapist. It's a strong trauma, and the fact that your parents treated it as a funny incident is concerning. This is unacceptable. It's awful, and I truly hope you make your mum confront why she reacted that way and why she didn't send your sister to therapy back then. It's important to get answers to those questions, and your sister should apologize to you. It might also be worth making sure her fiancé knows about the money. She demanded he should understand who he's dealing with. Author: Mum and Dad weren't joking about this initially. It was mostly my sister who started calling it a joke. It was a joke, but only when we got older. Of course, since then, my parents never left me alone with my older sister. Either they were in the room or my older brother was nearby. Only when I was 10 and my sister and I had normal relationships did the situation get discussed in a joking way. I forgave her and honestly thought it was a joke. Now I realize it wasn't, and she's hated me her whole life. Regarding therapy, I forgot to mention that she did see a therapist from ages 7 to 10. But she learned to tell him what he wanted to hear, and those sessions ended. Dad didn't object. Mum wanted a second opinion and found the best child psychologist in Alberta for her. He worked with her for almost 4 years. In the end, he said she had learned everything and helped her deal with trauma. But I feel like she just became very good at saying what adults wanted to hear. As for her fiancé, he knows. I sent him a long voice message and we talked for 2 hours on the phone. In the end, he just shrugged. Looking back, I think he was aware. He also shows some concerning traits. Your parents think they failed in raising your sister by allowing this behavior, ignoring her when she tried to strangle you, which became a family joke. It seems to me they project all their mistakes onto her, even though they were partly to blame. I definitely think this played a role. She showed signs of anxious behavior even as a child, pushing, biting, or intentionally harming my brothers or other kids at daycare. But I think the lack of attention from Mum broke her. Dad was busy with the boys, the nanny mostly took care of me, and an aunt mostly took care of her, but she couldn't replace mum. The problem is that even though things improved, when I was 12, my sister told me why she hated me, because she had hated me from the start. Mum was pregnant with the youngest sister, and my oldest sister took out her frustration on me on the house, or even screamed at the dog. To understand my sister better, it's worth noting she stole her fiancé from another girl she knew just because she wanted him and didn't care about the other girl. Psychologists often wait until someone turns 18 to diagnose borderline personality disorder, hoping the child will outgrow it, but adults with BPD often become master manipulators, able to deceive therapists, hide behavioral patterns, and lie about actions and feelings convincingly as if acting a role. They always have a reason in their head for what they do, which easily misleads others. Damn, I'm going down another rabbit hole here. Obviously, my sister will refuse therapy unless it's just to prove she was right all along. She didn't even give me that damn Lalaloopsy doll. She snatched it and burned it. Cutting off contact seems like the best option for anyone dealing with someone with untreatable BPD. Don't worry, your life will be much calmer without that drama and insane accusations. Don't stress about your sister refusing therapy. Treatment only works if the person is honest and willing to change. People with BPD often have neither. You should consider therapy for yourself. I did, and it really helped me. Alongside hearing stories like this, parents often indulge such children to keep the family together, but having a sibling with BPD is extremely difficult. Once you realize how abnormal all this is, you can start healing. Author, yes, mum, dad, and I are all going to therapy. Update 3. 3 months later, family therapy is going very well. My 2 brothers were given temporary leave to return to Canada. They had been serving abroad. Our family is on the road to recovery again, and mum and I are closer than ever. Honestly, it feels like I have my best friend back. As for my sister, honestly, I don't know what's going on with her. A friend still follows her social media, and she seems fine. The wedding was moved from December to November. She and her fiancé bought a house, and I've heard rumors that she's pregnant. She has cut off all contact with us. Her fiancé's family spreads nasty rumors about us, but we're holding strong. My older brother is getting married, so losing a terrible sister means I gain a wonderful one in return. She's so sweet, she messages me every couple of days, orders me food delivery when I'm sad, and even though she lives in another state, she asked if I felt comfortable being her bridesmaid. She's an only child, and her mum passed away, so I agreed. By next year, I'll officially have a new sister. I also got a boyfriend. He's in the army, too apparently unavoidable. He really supports me and loves me. It's almost been a month since we started dating. Update 4. After my sister's wedding, my family and I were excluded from attending the ceremony, but my cousins, friends, and her husband's family told me how it went. Nothing too special. His mother wore an ivory dress, and a few people brought their kids. Even though it was planned that there wouldn't be any children, the real drama started at the reception. I felt a bit sorry for my sister because of this, but the groom's mother invited one of his ex-girlfriends, apparently hoping it would create conflict, but it didn't work. She tried to come between my sister and her new husband, but credit where it's due, he asked her to leave. Honestly, it wasn't that dramatic. They made it to the altar, and today or tomorrow, they're heading on their honeymoon. My sister really was pregnant. At the end of the reception, the groom gave a speech with a slideshow, and on the last slide, they showed an ultrasound photo labeled baby surname June 2023. So, this story has already sparked a lot of opinions, and it's hard to add anything more. I'm just glad it ended the way it did, because often things turn out very differently.